Close your eyes.
Let your shoulders drop.
Let the tension in your jaw release.
You are safe where you are.
You are comfortable. The air around you is temperature controlled and the surface beneath you is soft.
But I want you to imagine you are not there.
I want you to imagine you have been transported back across the millennia. You open your eyes and expect to see the gleaming white marble of a movie set. You expect to see philosophers in pristine robes discussing geometry in the shade of a perfect temple. You expect the romanticized vision of the cradle of Western civilization.
Instead, you are hit by the dust. That is the first reason you would not last here.
The dust.
It is everywhere.
It is a fine powder of limestone and dry earth that coats the back of your throat the moment you inhale. It settles in the creases of your skin. It turns your eyelashes grey.
There is no escaping it.
You are standing on a dirt road in the height of summer.
The year is 430 BC. You are in Attica, but you are not in the city of Athens yet.
You are in the countryside. The first thing you notice is not the architecture. It is the light. The light here is violent. It is not the soft filtered sunshine of a modern afternoon.
It is a blinding, relentless glare that bounces off the grey rocks and the dry olive leaves.
It pierces your eyes. Without sunglasses, you find yourself squinting immediately. Your head begins to throb within minutes.
This is the harsh reality.
In the modern world, we are protected from the elements.
We move from air-conditioned houses to air-conditioned cars to air-conditioned offices. We have forgotten what it means to be at the mercy of the sun.
Here the sun is a physical weight.
It presses down on the top of your head. It heats the ground beneath your feet until the earth feels like a griddle.
You look down at your feet.
You are not wearing your cushioned sneakers with arch support.
You are wearing simple leather sandals. Maybe you are barefoot. The stones are sharp.
The ground is uneven.
Every step sends a shock up your shins. You would not last because your body has forgotten how to endure the ground itself. Let us begin to walk.
We are walking towards the city, but it is miles away. There are no taxis. There are no buses. There are no paved sidewalks. There is only this rutted cart track baked hard by months of drought. Listen to the sound of this world.
It is not quiet.
But it is not the mechanical noise you are used to.
There is no hum of electricity.
No distant roar of traffic.
Instead, there is a wall of sound from the cicadas. Millions of them.
They are hidden in the olive groves and the pine trees.
Their song is a high-pitched vibration that never stops.
It drills into your mind. It is the soundtrack of the heat. As you walk, you realize how thirsty you are.
This is the second reason you would struggle to survive. Water anxiety. In your world, water is magic.
You turn a tap and it flows. It is clean. It is cold. It is endless. You shower in it. You flush it away.
You hardly think about it.
Here water is life, and it is heavy.
To drink you must find a spring or a well. You must carry the water. Imagine the weight of a clay amphora filled with liquid. It pulls on your shoulder muscles. It strains your back, and the water inside is not ice cold.
It is lukewarm. It tastes of the earth. It might have sediment floating in it.
You take a sip.
It does not satisfy you the way you expect. You want ice. You want clear filtration, but you drink it anyway, because the sun is extracting moisture from your body with every second that passes. You keep walking.
The landscape is beautiful, but it is unforgiving. It is a landscape of sharp edges.
Thyme and sage bushes brush against your legs. They smell wonderful.
The scent of crushed herbs rises in the heat.
It is intense and resinous.
But the branches are scratchy and dry. You are tired now. You have only walked a mile, but without the stamina of an ancient farmer, you are exhausted. Your modern muscles are soft.
You are used to sitting in chairs with back support. Here there are no chairs.
If you want to rest, you must sit on a rock or the hard ground. There is no softness anywhere. The world is made of stone and wood and dirt.
Let us sit for a moment by the side of the road under the shade of an olive tree.
The shade offers a small relief, but the air is still hot. It is stagnant. There is no breeze today. Look at your hands.
In this world, your hands are your primary tools.
You would need them to work, to dig, to carry, to scrub. Your modern hands are smooth. The skin is thin.
Here, they would be blistered within an hour. They would be calloused and stained with soil that never quite washes off. You watch a figure approaching on the road.
It is a farmer leading a donkey.
He is small and wiry. His skin is leather. He is deeply tanned not for fashion, but from exposure.
He looks at you.
You realize how tall and soft you look compared to him. He has survived on a diet of barley and olives and diluted wine.
He has walked this road 10,000 times. He passes you. He smells of sweat and garlic and animals.
There is no deodorant here. There are no daily showers with scented soap.
The smells of humanity are unfiltered. This is another reality check.
The sensory overload of scent.
The world smells strong. It smells of dung and flowers and roasting meat and stagnant water. Your nose would take months to adjust.
You would feel constantly assaulted by the odors of life.
Let us rise and continue. The road begins to climb. The geography of Greece is mountainous. It is vertical. You are always going up or down.
Your calves burn. You are breathing heavy.
The air is dry.
It dries out your nasal passages. You begin to wonder about food.
You are used to a world of endless variety.
You can order sushi or pizza or tacos.
You can open a refrigerator and snack on cheese or chocolate.
Here hunger is a constant companion. It is not the starvation of famine, but the gnawing emptiness of a simple diet.
If you were here, you would eat bread.
Dense chewy barley bread.
You would eat onions. You would eat goat cheese.
You would eat olives.
Day after day. The same flavors.
The same textures. There is no sugar. That is a shock to your system.
Your body craves the quick energy of refined sugar, but it does not exist. You might get honey if you are lucky, but mostly you run on complex carbohydrates and olive oil. You would feel lethargic as your body goes through withdrawal.
You would feel a headache setting in behind your eyes.
The sun is moving lower in the sky now. The light is turning gold.
It is the famous golden hour of Greece. For a moment, the harshness fades and the beauty takes over.
The limestone hills glow.
The sea in the distance turns a deep violet color.
The wine-dark sea of Homer.
It is breathtaking, but as the sun sets, a new anxiety arises.
The darkness. This is perhaps the most profound reason you would not last.
You are a creature of the light. You are used to streetlights and headlights and the glow of screens.
You have never experienced true darkness. When the sun goes down here, the world disappears. There is no ambient glow from a nearby city.
There is only the moon and the stars. If the moon is new, it is pitch black.
You cannot see your hand in front of your face. Imagine the fear that brings.
The ancient world is full of dangers.
Wolves still roam these hills. Bandits watch the roads. Without light, you are vulnerable.
You are blind. You hurry your steps. You want to reach the shelter of the city walls before the light fails completely.
The ground cools rapidly. The heat of the day evaporates and a chill settles in the valleys. You are wearing a simple tunic. It offers little warmth.
You wrap your arms around yourself.
You miss the comfort of a synthetic fleece jacket. You miss the seal of a double-glazed window.
You finally reach the outskirts of the settlement.
It is not a sprawling metropolis.
It is a cluster of low mud brick houses with tiled roofs.
The streets are narrow and winding. They are not paved. They are mud and refuse.
You must watch where you step. There is no sanitation system as you know it. Waste is often thrown into the street.
The smell is pungent.
You find a place to rest. A courtyard in a modest home.
You are welcomed because hospitality is a sacred law here. You are given a cup of wine mixed with water.
It is resinous and strange to your tongue. You are given a piece of hard bread and some figs.
This is the final challenge of your first day. The bed.
There is no memory foam mattress. There are no Egyptian cotton sheets with a high thread count.
The bed is a wooden frame with rope webbing.
On top of it is a mattress stuffed with straw or dried leaves. It rustles when you move. It is lumpy.
It smells of dry grass.
The blanket is scratchy wool. It is heavy and rough against your skin.
You lie down. Your body aches from the walking. Your skin feels tight from the sun.
You close your eyes, but the world is not silent. Dogs bark in the distance. A baby cries in the neighboring house.
The walls are thin. You can hear the murmur of voices.
You lie there in the dark, and you realize how small you are.
In the modern world, you feel like the master of your environment.
You control the temperature. You control the light. You control the entertainment. Here you control nothing. You are subject to the rhythm of the earth. You rise with the sun because you cannot afford oil for lamps. You sleep when it is dark because there is nothing else to do.
You are part of the natural world, not separate from it.
It is a humbling thought.
As you drift towards sleep on your bed of straw, try to find comfort in that simplicity. There are no emails waiting for you.
There are no deadlines.
There are no notifications demanding your attention. There is only the dark, the cold air, the smell of the earth. You survived the first day.
But only just.
The reality of this life is a grind.
It is a slow, constant friction against your comfort zone.
It wears you down.
But in this story, we have time.
We have so much time.
We are going to explore every corner of this harsh reality. We will look at the lives of the rich and the poor, the soldiers and the slaves, the women and the men.
We will explore the winter when the damp cold seeps into your bones. We will explore the sea where the waves can crush a wooden hull like an eggshell. We will look at the medicine, the surgery without anesthesia,
the belief in angry gods. But for now, you are safe.
You are just a traveler in your mind. You can feel the softness of your real bed beneath you.
You can appreciate the blanket that covers you.
You can take a deep breath of clean, cold air. Let the contrast make you feel heavier. Let the knowledge of that hard ancient life make your current comfort feel even sweeter. You do not have to walk the dusty road tomorrow. You do not have to carry the water. You do not have to fear the dark. You can simply let go. Imagine the stars above the ancient landscape.
They are brighter than you have ever seen them.
The Milky Way is a solid band of white fire across the sky. The constellations are clear and sharp.
Under that vast indifferent sky the ancient world sleeps. When you finally begin to stir from your restless slumber upon the mattress of packed straw, the first thing you notice is not the gentle chime of a digital alarm clock or the soft programmed light of a smart lamp,
but rather the piercing crow of a rooster that sounds as if it is standing directly beside your head, followed immediately by the low and guttural bleating of goats that are kept in the courtyard just a few feet away from where you sleep. You attempt to roll over to find a cool spot on the pillow, but you remember instantly that there is no softness here, for the pillow is merely a sack filled with more dried grass or perhaps raw wool that smells faintly of lanolin and sheep.
And as you move your stiff limbs you feel the wooden slats of the bed frame digging into your hip through the thin mattress, reminding you that in this world, comfort is a luxury that has not yet been invented for the common man.
The light that filters into the room is grey and dim, coming from a small square window high up on the wall that has no glass to keep out the morning chill. So you lie there for a moment shivering under your scratchy blanket,
listening to the sounds of the household waiting up around you, the slapping of bare feet on hard earth floors, the clattering of clay pots, and the murmuring of voices that seem to carry through the thin walls as if there were no barriers at all. You realize with a sinking feeling that you need to use the bathroom, and this is perhaps the moment where the harsh reality of ancient life hits you with the most force, because there is no pristine tiled room down the hall with flushing water and ventilation fans.
Instead, you must reach under your wooden bed frame to find the chamber pot, a simple clay vessel that has sat there all night, and you must use it in the semi-darkness of the room, perhaps while others are sleeping nearby, stripping away every layer of privacy and dignity that you have been accustomed to in your modern life, where such functions are sterile and hidden away behind locked doors.
Once you have attended to this necessity, you are faced with the immediate problem of what to do with the contents, for there is no drain to wash it away.
And you realize that you or a servant must carry this vessel outside to a cesspit or simply toss it into the street, contributing to the pervasive and overwhelming smell that hangs over every ancient settlement like a heavy invisible fog.
Now that you are awake and standing on the cold dirt floor with your bare feet, you feel a grittiness between your toes that never really goes away, and you decide that you want to clean yourself, to wash away the sweat of the night and the dust of yesterday.
But you look around the room and see only a small basin of water that was fetched from the well the night before, and on the surface of the water there is a thin film of dust that has settled during the night.
You dip your hands into the water and it is shockingly cold, causing the skin on your arms to prickle and your breath to catch in your throat, and you splash it onto your face, hoping to feel refreshed, but without the fluffy absorbency of a cotton towel to dry yourself. You are forced to use a piece of rough linen cloth that feels more like canvas against your sensitive skin. You run your tongue over your teeth and feel the fuzzy coating of morning breath, and your hand instinctively reaches for a toothbrush that does not exist. So instead, you must pick up a small frayed stick or a piece of rough linen cloth, perhaps dipping it into a mixture of crushed oyster shells or pumice powder that acts as an abrasive. And you must scrub your teeth with this gritty substance that tastes of chalk and salt, hoping that you do not scour away your enamel in the process. There is no minty freshness to wake you up, no fluoride to protect your teeth, only the mechanical action of rubbing and the lingering taste of the earth in your mouth.
And you realize how much of your morning joy was dependent on that simple sensation of artificial cleanliness. Now comes the process of bathing, which is entirely different from the hot shower you crave. For in this world soap is a rare and strange substance mostly used for washing clothes. And for your body, you must use olive oil.
Imagine standing naked in the cool morning air of the courtyard, pouring thick green olive oil from a clay flask into the palm of your hand, and then smearing this heavy grease all over your body, feeling it coat your arms, your chest, and your legs,
trapping the dirt and the sweat against your skin in a slick and sticky layer. It feels counterintuitive to you, because in your time oil is something you wash off, not something you wash with. But here you must rub it in deep, massaging your muscles which are sore from the hard bed, until you are glistening like a statue in the morning sun. Then comes the strigil, a curved metal tool that looks like a blunt knife,
and you must take this piece of cold bronze and scrape it firmly against your oiled skin,
dragging it down your arms and legs to collect the oil and the dirt and the dead skin in a grey sludge that you flick onto the ground. It is an abrasive and vigorous process that leaves your skin looking red and raw, and while it does remove the dirt, it leaves behind a film of oil that will stay with you all day, soaking into your clothes and catching the dust from the road, so that you never feel truly dry or truly clean in the way you are used to. You smell of olive oil and unwashed hair, for washing your hair is a major undertaking that requires buckets of water and hours of drying time, so you likely just tie it back or cover it, letting the natural oils build up day after day until your scalp itches in a way that becomes a constant background hum to your existence. Now that you are scraped and oiled, you must get dressed, and you look for your underwear, but you find none, for the concept of fitted elastic undergarments is thousands of years in the future. And you feel a sudden vulnerability knowing that there is nothing between you and the outer world but a single layer of cloth. You pick up your chiton, which is essentially a large rectangular sheet of wool or linen, and you have to drape it around your body in a specific way, pinning it at the shoulders with sharp fibulae, which are like large safety pins made of bronze or bone. There are no zippers to zip, no buttons to button, no Velcro to fasten, only these sharp pins that can easily come undone or prick you if you move too suddenly. And you feel the constant anxiety of your clothing slipping or falling open as you move. You tie a simple leather cord around your waist to cinch the fabric, pulling it up to create a pouch of material over your belt, adjusting the folds so that they hang correctly. But the wool is itchy against your bare skin, scratching at your neck and your thighs with every step you take. The air flows freely up under the tunic, which might sound pleasant in the heat of summer, but in the cool of the morning, it leaves you feeling exposed and drafty, and you miss the secure hug of a pair of jeans or the softness of a cotton t-shirt. You look down at your feet and slide them into your leather sandals, fastening the straps around your ankles, and you can already feel where the stiff leather will rub a blister on your heel and between your toes, for these shoes have not been broken in by a machine, but must be softened by the pain of your own feet over weeks of walking. You are now ready to face the day, but before you leave the small sanctuary of your sleeping quarters, you instinctively look for a mirror to check your appearance, to see if your hair is neat or if there is food on your face. But there is no glass mirror on the wall if you are wealthy. You might have a polished disc of bronze that gives you a distorted golden-hued reflection where you can barely make out your features, but if you are an ordinary person, you rely on the reflection in a bowl of water or simply the feedback of others. You do not know what you truly look like, and this loss of self-image is a strange psychological burden, for you cannot construct your identity through your reflection as you do in the modern world, and you must trust that you look acceptable to the outside world without ever really knowing for sure. You step out of the room into the central courtyard of the house, which is the heart of the home, an open-air space where the family gathers, and the light is brighter here, casting long shadows across the beaten earth floor. You see the rest of the household engaging in their morning tasks, the women spinning wool with drop spindles that twirl endlessly, their hands moving with a practiced rhythm that you could never replicate. The slaves grinding grain in a stone quern with a repetitive grating sound that sets your teeth on edge. The air is filled with the smoke of a small fire that has been kindled in a brazier to heat water or bake bread, and because there is no chimney, the smoke lingers in the courtyard, stinging your eyes and making you cough, adding a layer of wood smoke to the scent of oil and animals. You are hungry, and your stomach growls, anticipating a breakfast of eggs and toast and coffee, but you are handed a piece of barley bread that was baked days ago, and is now hard as a rock, requiring you to dip it in a cup of diluted wine just to make it chewable. This is your breakfast, a sup of wine and bread, perhaps with a few figs or olives if you are lucky, but there is no caffeine to jumpstart your brain, no sugar to give you a rush of energy. Only the slow-burning fuel of complex carbohydrates and alcohol. You chew the bread slowly, feeling the coarse grains against your tongue, realizing that every meal will be a workout for your jaw, and that the simple act of eating requires a level of effort and patience that you are not accustomed to. As you sit there on a wooden stool, chewing your wine-soaked bread, you look around at the walls of the house, which are made of mud brick and plaster, painted in simple washes of red or white, and you notice the cracks in the plaster, the places where the damp has seeped in, the trails of ants marching across the floor in an endless line that no one bothers to stop. You realize that your home is not a sealed fortress against nature,
but a porous shelter that exists in a constant state of negotiation with the elements, where the wind blows through the eaves, where the insects are roommates rather than intruders,
and where the temperature inside is almost the same as the temperature outside.
The concept of indoor living is different here, for you spend most of your time in the courtyard, effectively outdoors, and the small dark rooms are only for sleeping or storage.
So there is no retreating to your bedroom to sulk or to watch a movie or to have some alone time. You are constantly visible, constantly audible, constantly part of the collective unit of the family. And the modern concept of privacy, of having a space that is entirely your own, is a fantasy that would be incomprehensible to the people around you. The sun is rising higher now, and the heat is beginning to build, radiating of the stone walls and the dirt floor, promising another day of relentless intensity. And you feel the weight of the long hours stretching out before you. There is no commute to work, no office to go to, but there is the endless cycle of labor required just to maintain life, the fetching of water, the grinding of grain, the mending of tools, the washing of clothes.
A list of chores that never ends and that requires physical strength and endurance for every single task. You finish your bread and drink the last dregs of the watered wine, feeling the sediment grit between your teeth, and you wipe your hands on your tunic because there are no napkins, adding another stain to the wool that will not be washed out for weeks. You stand up,
your joints creaking slightly in the damp morning air, and you prepare to leave the house, to step out into the street and face the city, but even the act of leaving requires mental preparation.
You must check your sandals. You must adjust your tunic. You must make sure you have your coin purse, if you have one, tucked securely into your belt, for there are no pockets, and you must prepare your face to meet the world.
Composing your expression into one of stoic endurance, the harsh reality is not just the big dangers of war or plague, but the accumulation of these tiny discomforts, the grit in your eye, the itch of the wool, the smell of the chamber pot, the hardness of the bread,
the lack of a clear reflection, the absence of a soft chair. It is a world where the edges are sharp, where the textures are rough, where the smells are strong, and where your body is constantly providing you with feedback about its discomfort, never letting you forget that you are a biological organism struggling to survive in a physical world. But as you stand there in the courtyard, breathing in the wood smoke and the dust, there is also a strange sense of immediacy, a feeling of being completely present in the moment. For you cannot be distracted by a phone or a screen. You can only be here now.
In the light and the heat and the smell of the ancient morning, you take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the air of a world that has not yet been polluted by industrial exhaust, air that smells of earth and animals and burning wood.
And you step forward toward the heavy wooden door that leads to the street.
The hinges groan as you push it open, the sound of heavy timber against timber, and the bright white light of the street floods into the entryway, blinding you for a moment with its intensity. You step out across the threshold, leaving the relative safety of the house behind,
and your sandaled foot lands on the dust of the public road, beginning the journey of the day that will take you into the heart of the city, into the noise and the chaos and the beauty of a civilization that is both familiar and utterly alien.
You are awake, you are oiled, you are fed, and you are dressed, and though you are uncomfortable by every modern standard, you are alive in the year 430 BC, ready to witness the wonders and the horrors that await you in the market and the temple and the gymnasium. The morning ritual is complete. The sun is climbing the sky, and the shadow of the house retreats as the day begins in earnest, inviting you to walk deeper into this dream of the past, to explore the limits of your endurance, and to find the stillness that exists even in the midst of the harsh reality.
As you finally push open the heavy wooden door that separates the quiet, domestic safety of the courtyard from the roaring public life of the street, you are immediately enveloped not by the clean air you crave, but by a thick, turbulent atmosphere that is a complex blend of wood smoke from countless morning cooking fires, the pungent scent of unwashed humanity, the sharp tang of vinegar and spoiled fruit, and the metallic odor of damp earth mixed with animal waste that has been baking in the sun for days.
A sensory assault that confirms you are truly standing in the unfiltered reality of 430 BC. The moment your sandaled foot touches the ground, you are reminded that the street is not a smooth, paved surface designed for easy transit, but a chaotic, uneven,
and often treacherous expanse of compacted dirt and mud that is rutted by the wheels of ox carts and churned by the hooves of donkeys,
forcing you to look down with every step so that you might avoid twisting your ankle on a loose stone or stepping into a puddle of stagnant water whose true composition you prefer not to contemplate.
You begin to walk, and you are immediately plunged into a crowd that moves with a purposeful, yet strangely fluid and unpredictable rhythm, for there are no sidewalks, no traffic laws, and no sense of personal space, so that you are constantly brushing shoulders and elbows with strangers,
Feeling the rough wool of their clothing scrape against your tunic, and experiencing the constant low-level anxiety of being jostled and pushed without apology or acknowledgement.
The noise is immediately overwhelming to your modern ears, which are accustomed to the dull drone of technology, but not the sharp, varied cacophony of raw life, consisting of the insistent braying of stubborn mules laden with terracotta jars, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of a stonecutter working in a nearby doorway,
The aggressive shouting of vendors advertising their wares in a harsh, melodic Greek you can barely understand, and the high-pitched, piercing cries of small children who are left to play unsupervised in the dust and debris.
Your modern brain instinctively searches for familiar landmarks or street signs, a comforting grid system that could tell you where you are and where you are going. But there is nothing of the sort. Only a winding labyrinth of narrow alleys and dark passages that all look identical.
With houses built right up to the edge of the thoroughfare, their blank walls offering no guidance, forcing you to rely on vague directions and the intuition of someone who has lived here their entire life, instantly revealing your own disorientation and helplessness.
You realize that navigation is a skill entirely divorced from maps and GPS, depending instead on the faint memory of a particular carving over a door or the sight of a specific, oddly shaped olive tree in the distance, a system of wayfinding that is deeply personal and intuitive.
And you feel the panic of knowing that if you were to become separated from your guide, you would be utterly lost within minutes, swallowed by the confusing, undifferentiated mass of the city.
As you walk, you notice the lack of color that you associate with modern cities, for there are no neon signs or brightly painted advertisements, only the muted earth tones of the environment, the terracotta tiles, the sun-bleached wood, the grey limestone dust, and the simple brown or off-white wool of the clothing, creating a uniform, dusty palette that is occasionally punctuated only by the vibrant scarlet or indigo of a merchant's imported cloth or the shocking green of fresh lettuce piled high on a cart. You pass an area where a stream of liquid is running down the middle of the street, carrying with it a scattering of trash and organic waste, and the smell that rises from it is so foul and concentrated that you have to cover your nose and mouth with your hand, walking quickly to escape the miasma, understanding that this is the reality of ancient sanitation,
where the waste of a community is dealt with not by underground pipes and treatment plants, but by simple gravity and the infrequent heavy rain. You observe the people moving around you, and you realize that everybody here is a testament to labor and exposure, for the men are lean and muscled from constant work, their faces etched with the deep lines of a life lived outdoors, while the women, when you see them, are often veiled or quickly retreating from public view, their clothing heavy and modest, and you feel the weight of their judgment upon your own relatively soft and unblemished modern skin. The social order is visible in the very act of walking, as a heavily armed hoplite soldier pushes through the crowd with an air of absolute authority, and a group of slaves carrying heavy baskets of fish, forced to hug the walls to get out of the way of a magistrate riding a mule, and you realize that your own assumed equality and right to passage in the street does not exist here.
For you must constantly defer to anyone who is deemed higher in the rigid social hierarchy. Finally, after what feels like an hour of tense, vigilant walking, the streets begin to widen and the houses give way to larger, more important buildings, public fountains, columned porches, and large open squares signaling that you have reached the heart of the city. The agora, the central gathering place that functions as the market, the court, and the political forum all in one overwhelming location. As you step into the vast, sun-drenched square, the noise level increases exponentially, transforming from a simple cacophony into a roar of human activity, where hundreds of transactions are taking place simultaneously, and the air vibrates with the combined energy of buying, selling, arguing, gossiping, and debating, a massive,
unamplified sound that makes your head spin and your thoughts feel fragmented. The ground of the agora is a sea of dirt and makeshift stalls, covered in everything imaginable. Heaps of purple grapes, stacks of rough pottery, baskets of dried figs, sides of salted fish, and the constant movement of animals that have been brought in to be sold or slaughtered. And you struggle to walk a straight line as you weave between the vendors' tables and the masses of people examining the goods.
You are struck by the sheer lack of packaging, for nothing is wrapped in plastic or placed in convenient containers.
Instead, bread is handled by dozens of hands, olives are scooped directly out of large clay jars, and meat sits uncovered on wooden blocks.
The thought of buying and consuming anything here gives you a sudden, sharp jolt of fear about pathogens and stomach illness, as your modern immune system, which has been protected by pasteurization and refrigeration, immediately recognizes the danger lurking in the lack of hygiene, reminding you that a simple piece of spoiled food could be a death sentence here. With no reliable antibiotics to save you, you pause by a fountain, a large stone basin fed by an aqueduct, and you watch as women fill their large, graceful hydria water jars, noticing that the men stand slightly apart, engaging in conversation that is loud and emphatic, full of gesticulation and rapid-fire questions.
And you realize that even in this seemingly public space, there are invisible boundaries and rules about who speaks to whom and where they are permitted to stand.
If you were to stay in this environment for too long, you would suffer from constant sensory fatigue, for your brain would never be able to fully process and filter the continuous input of smells, sounds, sights, and physical contact, leading to an exhaustion that is deeper and more profound than the tiredness you feel from mental work or staring at a screen. The very air in the Agora seems to hold a charge of high-stakes commerce and political tension. As men stand on slight elevations to address the passing crowd, their voices ringing with passionate rhetoric about democracy and justice, and you realize that this is not just a market, but the engine room of an intense and often brutal political system, where an ill-timed joke or a poorly worded opinion could lead to serious social or legal trouble. You feel a sudden, intense pressure to appear purposeful, for loitering is not a common practice, and you realize that in this densely packed community, every action is observed and judged, every piece of clothing scrutinized, and every hesitation interpreted, so you must affect a look of calm concentration, even as your mind is reeling from the constant stimulation.
As you stand there, trying to absorb the sheer scale of the human endeavor around you, you realize that the most exhausting part of ancient life is the lack of escape, the inability to ever truly be alone or quiet, for even the dark rooms of the house contain the noise of the family, and the minute you step outside, you are enveloped by the massive, overwhelming presence of the crowd.
There is no concept of a headphone to block out the noise, no private office to retreat to, no book to lose yourself in that can truly distract you from the immediate, demanding reality of your physical surroundings. And you understand that your modern self, which relies heavily on solitude and curated silence for psychological recovery, would quickly suffer a kind of nervous exhaustion in this ceaseless flow of human and animal traffic.
You feel the dry heat of the sun on your neck, and the itch of the wool against your skin, and the grit of the dust between your teeth, a constellation of small physical discomforts that are woven into the very fabric of the day, an ongoing tax on your energy that never grants you a moment of true physical or mental repose. Let the image of the Agora fade now, the noise soften to a distant hum, the smells dissolve into the neutral air around you, and allow the realization of that ancient fatigue to settle into your own limbs, making them heavy and ready for rest. You have made the journey to the marketplace, and you have survived the sensory bombardment, and now we must begin the slow, deliberate return to the calm of the dream. Carrying the weight of that experience into your deep sleep, take a slow, deep breath,
feeling the air fill your lungs and then exhale slowly, releasing the tension that the memory of the crowd has instilled in your body. The sun is no longer blinding, but a soft, warm glow behind your eyelids,
and the dust that coated your throat has been washed away by a cooling, in a current of peace. The market fades, the noise fades, the harsh reality of the ancient streets recedes into the background, leaving only the rhythm of this voice and the deepening quiet of your own mind.
Allow the vibrant chaos of the Agora to completely fade now, letting the noise and the harsh sunlight recede into the distance, and imagine yourself slowly ascending a gentle, sun-baked slope to find a quiet place high above the city. A place where the air feels slightly cooler, and the only sound is the whispering breeze that moves through the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of thyme and distant sea salt. You have arrived at the Pia Naix, The simple, open-air assembly ground where the citizens of Athens gather to make the decisions that guide the entire state. And as you stand on the rough, carved stone where thousands once sat, you realize that the most profound reason you would not last in this world is not the dust or the hunger, but the overwhelming, terrifying burden of total responsibility that comes with being a citizen here.
You would be immediately confronted by the profound truth that the lauded democracy you studied in books is a fragile, demanding, and brutally exclusive system, for only a small, select group of adult, male, Athenian-born individuals are granted the privileges and the crushing duties of citizenship, meaning that the vast majority of people you know, including women, foreigners, and slaves, would possess no political voice whatsoever, their lives subject entirely to the votes of others.
If by some miracle of time travel you were to qualify as a citizen, you would find that your political participation is not the simple 10-minute act of casting a secret ballot once every few years, but a constant, mandatory commitment to attend the assembly, a gathering where you are expected to spend the entire day listening to passionate, complex arguments about every minute detail of the state, from negotiating a treaty with Sparta to deciding the proper size of the olive oil export quota. There is no concept of a distant representative to absorb the details and synthesize the information for you, so you must arrive fully informed, fully engaged, and ready to stand up, if necessary, and address the thousands of your peers, shouting your opinions across the open space,
knowing that every word you utter is instantly judged by the sharpest orators and the most critical minds in the ancient world.
The psychological pressure of this perpetual public scrutiny would be immense, for in a society without privacy, your personal character is your public shield, and any misstep, any sign of indecision, any perceived arrogance in your speech,
or any failure to display the correct amount of patriotic fervor could be seized upon by your rivals and used to destroy your reputation, your career, and even your future livelihood.
You realize that your modern tendency towards self-effacement and polite reticence would be interpreted as weakness, or perhaps even cowardice, requiring you to constantly adopt a loud, aggressive, and highly performative demeanor just to survive the political arena, a level of constant, exhausting outward projection that would deplete your energy far faster than manual labor ever could. And lurking just beneath the surface of this vibrant political life is the constant, silent anxiety of ostracism, a unique and terrifying political tool that allows the citizens, once a year, to hold a secret vote on who among them has grown too powerful, too wealthy, or simply too irritating to the demos, the people whose prominence is threatening the delicate balance of the city. Imagine the feeling of walking through the agora, knowing that if the votes go against you, the simple act of scribbling your name onto a shard of broken pottery, an ostrakon, by enough of your neighbors, could result in your absolute banishment from the city for 10 full years, a punishment that means leaving your family, abandoning your property, and losing your entire social identity in a culture where identity is defined by your relationship to your home city.
This is a risk entirely unrelated to any crime or treason, but merely a punishment for being conspicuous, for being too successful, or for having too many strong opinions, instilling in every prominent person a chilling psychological need to perpetually manage their image,
forcing them to subtly tone down their achievements and their displays of wealth lest they tempt the envy and the silent, destructive power of the collective vote.
The sheer unpredictability of this threat would introduce a continuous, low-grade current of paranoia into your life, making every word you speak, every debate you win, and every favor you accept a potential catalyst for your complete ruin, an inescapable political shadow that looms over even the most celebratory moments of your career. Furthermore, the concept of Athenian citizenship is utterly and irrevocably fused with the non-negotiable duty of military service, meaning that if you are a citizen, you are also a soldier or a hoplite, automatically enrolled in the defense of the state, regardless of your personal wishes, your profession,
or your desire for a quiet life. You would be expected to own and maintain your own heavy bronze armor, your shield, and your spear, a massive financial investment that represents a significant portion of your wealth, and you must always be ready to answer the call of the trumpeter,
to drop your tools or your ledger and immediately march out the gates with your fellow citizens to meet the enemy in a bloody, brutal clash of shields.
This is not the professional, detached warfare of the modern era, but a terrifying and intimate engagement where you stand shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors in a tight phalanx, facing an enemy who is equally terrified, knowing that the battle will be decided in a few minutes of intense, close quarters pushing, stabbing and hacking, where a small hesitation could result in the death of your entire rank.
The constant, low-level anxiety of the citizen who is also a soldier would permeate every aspect of your daily existence, for every political decision about territory or resources is also a personal decision about life and death, meaning that the vote you cast in the morning assembly might commit you to a march across the border and a deadly battle by the end of the week. You would never truly know if the harvest you are planting will be yours to reap, or if the house you are building will be yours to finish, because the political and military realities of the city are a permanent, existential threat to your personal longevity.
A source of profound insecurity that contrasts sharply with the stability and expectation of safety that anchors your modern life.
Imagine trying to relax on that hard straw mattress at night, knowing that a sudden torchlight parade outside could mean a declaration of war, forcing you to gather your bronze breastplate and your helmet,
saying what might be your last goodbyes to your family before marching out into the dark unknown, an inherent vulnerability that is simply unthinkable in your well-ordered time.
The harsh reality of ancient Greece, at its core, is the absolute lack of protective insulation between the individual and the state, between your personal safety and the collective will of the people, demanding a level of public engagement and constant physical readiness that would render your modern, private, and specialized life entirely unsustainable. Let the weight of that bronze armor dissolve now. Let the shouts of the assembly become a gentle, distant echo, and let the threatening names written on the ostracism fragments turn back into harmless dust and clay, as you realize that the greatest political blessing of your own time is the freedom to simply observe, to specialize, and to entrust the defense of the realm to others while you sleep soundly in your bed.
You are safe now from the demands of the Pianaics, safe from the risk of banishment, and safe from the sudden call to arms, allowing the immense psychological burden of ancient citizenship to fall away from your shoulders, leaving your body and mind light and utterly without responsibility. Feel the profound comfort of your privacy, the quiet assurance that your opinions will not result in exile,
and the luxury of knowing that your life is not constantly on the line for the sake of a political border dispute. Settle deeper into the soft support beneath you.
The political world of the ancient Greeks is dissolving like mist now. Let the sounds of the Pianaics assembly fade entirely, and let the pressure of political life be replaced by the more fundamental, constant weight of sustenance. The never-ending task of simply feeding your body in a world where food is neither abundant, diverse, nor easily acquired, but is instead the result of continuous, back-breaking labor that begins long before the first bite ever reaches your mouth. You would be confronted daily by the inescapable reality that the very foundation of your diet is barley, a grain that is far rougher and more difficult to process than the wheat you are accustomed to, and before you can even think of eating. That grain must be transformed into meal through the laborious process of grinding, a task that, if you are a woman or a slave, demands several strenuous hours each day. Imagine the heavy, repetitive motion of pushing a large, rough stone quern against another stone, feeling the friction and the strain in your arms and shoulders, hearing the endless, rhythmic scritch-scratch of the grit on grit, a sound that quickly becomes the infuriating soundtrack of your morning. Knowing that every single calorie you consume must first be earned by this brute force mechanical effort. When the meal is finally prepared, it is mixed with water, and perhaps a little yeast to create the barley cake or flatbread, which is often thick, heavy, and chewy, possessing a density that makes it feel like it is sitting like a lump of clay in your stomach. A far cry from the light, airy processed flours and diverse baked goods that your modern palate is used to.
Your daily intake would revolve around this triumvirate of basics. The heavy barley bread, the simple, bitter taste of olives preserved in salt and oil, and the constant consumption of wine diluted with water, known as krata, which serves not just as a drink, but as the only reliable form of sterile liquid, meaning that you are never truly sober and never truly hydrated by pure water alone, existing in a perpetual state of mild, alcoholic haziness.
You would desperately miss the sugar that fuels your modern brain, the clean rush of caffeine that snaps your mind to attention, the vibrant array of spices from across the globe, and the cooling crunch of ice, all of which are luxuries beyond your grasp, leaving your taste buds unsatisfied and your body running on a low, monotonous hum of consistent, but uninspired nutritional input. This simple diet, while providing necessary fuel for physical labor, would leave you in a perpetual state of subtle hunger, not the gnawing, sharp pain of starvation, but the dull, ever-present emptiness of a stomach that is filled but not fully satisfied,
causing a low-grade irritability and a deep-seated longing for the simple pleasure of a genuinely sweet or complexly flavored dish. And when illness inevitably strikes, the discomfort of the physical body is immediately amplified by the terror of the ancient medical reality, for you are not taken to a sterile hospital filled with advanced diagnostic equipment, but you are instead placed in the hands of a healer or physician who operates under the guiding principle of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile.
You would be told that your fever, your cough, or your pain is not caused by an unseen microbe or a failing organ, but by an imbalance of these internal fluids, perhaps too much yellow bile causing a rash, or too much phlegm leading to a persistent cold.
And the treatments offered would seem bizarre and terrifying to your modern, scientific mind. Imagine being prescribed a treatment of bloodletting, where a vein is deliberately cut to drain out a quantity of your essential fluid, a process that is intended to reduce an excess of blood, but in reality weakens your already suffering body.
Or being forced to consume noxious herbal concoctions that induce violent vomiting or purging, all designed to forcefully expel the offending humor from your system.
The sheer lack of reliable pain relief is perhaps the most horrifying reality, for without morphine or anesthesia, any serious injury or compound fracture, a deep wound, or an attempted amputation must be endured with only the desperate ingestion of alcohol or a few mild herbs like willow bark,
leaving you entirely subject to the raw, visceral shock of pure physical agony. Even more unsettling is the terrifying realization that minor injuries become potentially mortal threats.
A scraped knee that becomes slightly infected, a common cold that descends into the chest, or a chipped tooth that turns into a deep abscess. Any of these trivial modern ailments carries the very real possibility of unchecked infection and of rapid, painful death, with no antibiotics or clean surgery to halt the inevitable decline. The vulnerability of childhood is especially harrowing, for you would witness the constant, casual presence of infant mortality, knowing that perhaps a quarter of all children die before the age of 5 from illnesses that your world considers utterly benign, such as diarrhea, fever, or the measles, forcing every parent to maintain a stoic. You would live in a world where the body is a complete mystery, where sickness is often interpreted as a divine curse or a moral failing, and where the line between superstition and science is blurred, leading you to seek comfort not just from the physician, but from the temple priest, hoping that a sacrifice to Asclepius or a purifying ritual might succeed where the physician's poultices and purges have failed. This constant, underlying fear of the physical is a heavy, invisible weight carried by every ancient person, knowing that your body is a deeply fragile vessel, perpetually susceptible to lethal dangers that are easily treatable in the future. A reality that makes every headache a potential precursor to a terminal fever and every stomach cramp a sign of fatal imbalance. Let the rough taste of the barley bread dissolve now. Let the grating sound of the quern grow silent, and let the unsettling fear of the humus drain entirely from your system, as you acknowledge the profound peace that comes from the silent assurance of modern medicine and the safety of a well-stocked refrigerator. You are not required to grind your own sustenance. You are not in danger of a surgeon's bloody blade, and your small, modern discomforts are not signs of cosmic imbalance, allowing the knowledge of that ancient physical fragility to make your own strong, healthy body feel deeply secure and profoundly relaxed. Settle deeper into the quietude, letting your breath grow slow and even, as the world of barley and bile recedes, leaving you suspended in a place of protected, unburdened sleep. Let your modern sense of urgency and adherence to the clock completely dissolve now, allowing the strict, segmented precision of your current life to be replaced by the more fluid, natural, and ultimately more demanding concept of time that governed the existence of the ancient Greeks. A time measured not by ticking mechanisms, but by the slow, inexorable movement of the sun across the sky and the diminishing volume of water in a clay pot.
You would quickly discover that the day is divided into 12 roughly equal seasonal hours, meaning that the length of the first hour of daylight in the height of summer could be significantly longer than the first hour during the short days of winter,
shattering your modern expectation that an hour is a fixed 60-minute unit. and forcing your entire schedule to fluctuate constantly with the changing seasons and the whims of the solar orbit. Imagine having to rely on the shadow cast by a sundial, known as a gnomon, or the measured drip of a water clock, or clepsydra, which is a heavy, cumbersome pot with a small hole in the bottom to gauge the passage of time, understanding that this system is imprecise,
unreliable on cloudy days, and entirely focused on duration rather than on a standardized, fixed point that allows for synchronization and POE planning across the entire city.
This lack of precise, mechanical timekeeping would eliminate your ability to operate on the rigid, highly efficient schedules that define your current productivity, for there are no synchronized trains, no fixed appointments, and no concept of being exactly 5 minutes late, forcing you to live in a perpetual state of loose approximation where activities begin when the light is right or when enough people have gathered, rather than when the digital number on a screen turns to a POE-determined sequence.
The harsh reality of the ancient day is that it is primarily structured by the labor itself, a continuous cycle of physically demanding tasks that begin with the first grey light and only end when the darkness makes manual work impossible. A relentless, grinding repetition of farming, fetching, carrying, and crafting that never truly allows for the modern luxury of a clear boundary between work and rest. You would experience a fundamental lack of leisure time as you understand it. For the concept of a weekend, a dedicated 2-day period free from toil and reserved for recuperation and personal pursuits, simply does not exist in this agrarian and craft-based economy.
Meaning that your physical strength is perpetually being consumed by the immediate, practical necessities of survival.
The festivals and religious holidays that punctuate the year are for brief respites, but these are often filled with ritual duties, public processions, and intense social obligations, so that the body is still taxed and the mind is never truly allowed to drift into the quiet,
self-directed freedom that defines your modern concept of time off. This constant circular nature of manual exertion, where the work done today must immediately be redone tomorrow, the grain must be ground again, the water must be fetched again, the field must be tended again, would lead to a deep-seated physical exhaustion that is chronic.
A weariness that seeps into your bones and is never fully remedied by a night's sleep on a hard straw mattress.
Now, as you settle deeper into the profound contrast between their life and yours, you must confront the brutal economic foundation that allows some citizens to even contemplate abstract politics and philosophy, which is the omnipresent, unshakable reality of slavery.
A system that underpins virtually every aspect of ancient society, and gives the citizen the free time he so desperately needs.
You would be constantly aware that the grinding labor that keeps the city functioning, the dangerous work in the silver mines, the relentless construction of temples, the strenuous operation of the workshops, and the most tedious, repetitive domestic chores is performed by the vast, invisible population of human property. People who have absolutely no rights, no personal sovereignty, and no control over their own bodies or their future. The psychological horror of this proximity to absolute, dehumanizing control would be inescapable, forcing you to navigate a society where your neighbor might own a dozen people, where the person serving your bread or carrying your water is a slave, and where your own relative freedom is based on the constant, unrewarded physical sacrifice of another human being.
Imagine the moral friction of living in a world where the principles of democracy, freedom, and justice are loudly and passionately debated by citizens on the PNIX, while at the very same time,
those citizens are utterly dependent on a system of absolute control and permanent violence against a massive segment of the population, a profound ethical contradiction that would weigh heavily on your modern consciousness. The reality is that a modern person, with their deep-seated belief in individual rights and human dignity, would struggle not only with the physical hardship of the ancient world, but also with the inescapable complicity in the institution of slavery, finding it impossible to simply ignore or justify the suffering that supports the entire political and economic structure. You would witness the casual brutality, the chains, the whips, the absolute power of the master to inflict punishment, and you would realize that the entire structure of ancient comfort and classical civilization is built on a foundation of terror, a silent scream that is muted only by the noise and dust of the city, a harsh, undeniable truth that no amount of marble architecture can hide. This is the most challenging of all the harsh realities, the loss of your modern moral sanctuary, the realization that to survive here, You would have to participate in, or at least silently accept, an economic system built on the complete annihilation of human freedom, a burden of conscience that would make sleep restless and the light of day feel heavy with ethical compromise.
Allow the weight of that moral compromise to lift from your soul now. Let the vision of the slave's endless labor recede into the darkness, and feel the profound lightness of living in a time where your body is your own, where your labor is compensated,
And where the precise ticking of your modern clock is a measurement of your own time, not the duration of another's servitude.
settle back into the luxurious and burdened freedom of your own bed, where you control your hours, where your body is at rest, and where the moral weight of the past is nothing more than a soft, distant story, allowing the peaceful assurance of your freedom to deepen the calm
And to pull you down into a heavy, uninterrupted slumber.
as the noise of the agora and the intensity of the assembly fade entirely from your awareness. Let us turn inward, stepping across the threshold of the home once more to explore the harsh reality of the private life in ancient Greece.
A reality fundamentally defined by strict gender segregation and the near total seclusion of women, which would completely shatter your modern assumptions about partnership, equality, and emotional intimacy.
If you were a woman in this era, your world would be a radically confined one, primarily centered within the gynaeconites, the designated women's quarters of the house, which are often located on an upper floor or in a segregated interior section with minimal access to the street or the courtyard, creating a deliberate architectural barrier between you and the public life of the city.
Your purpose here is not to engage in intellectual pursuits, or to seek personal fulfillment, or to cultivate a career, but to manage the household stores, oversee the slaves, and most importantly, to produce and raise legitimate male heirs,
a function so central to the survival of the family and the state that it supersedes all other personal desires or ambitions. You would be expected to spend your day spinning wool, weaving cloth, and managing the domestic economy, performing essential, relentless labor that is vital to the home's survival. Yet the reward for this continuous toil is not independence, but perpetual submission to a male guardian, or curious, who is legally responsible for every single aspect of your existence, from your finances to your public movements.
The modern ideal of romantic love as the foundation for marriage is a concept utterly foreign to this culture, where the typical Athenian marriage is a strictly utilitarian transaction, an agreement between the groom and the bride's father designed solely for the transfer of property, the cementing of political alliances, and the aforementioned production of new citizens. Imagine being married at a very young age, perhaps as young as 14 or 15, to a man often twice your age, a virtual stranger with whom you share no personal history or emotional bond.
A relationship that is fundamentally a legal and biological contract rather than a union of hearts and minds, leaving your desire for companionship and romantic intimacy completely unfulfilled.
The greatest contrast lies in the absolute separation between the sexes, even within the confines of the same house, as the husband typically spends his evenings in the ante in the men's dining room hosting his male friends for a symposium, a drinking party characterized by political debate, intellectual discussion,
and the company of courtesans or hired female entertainers, while the wife remains sequestered in the gynaeconites.
This institutionalized detachment means that the primary intellectual and emotional life of the husband is lived entirely outside the company of his wife, who remains largely uneducated and uninformed about the public matters that consume his attention, creating an unbridgeable chasm of understanding that makes true
deep personal partnership almost impossible. If you were an Athenian man, your wife would be your functional manager of the home, your provider of heirs, but your emotional and intellectual equal would likely be found among your male peers, or perhaps a highly educated hetera or courtesan.
And the quiet devotion you seek in modern marriage would be a fragmented and difficult ideal to grasp within the confines of this social structure.
If you were a modern woman transported here, your deep-seated expectation of autonomy and public engagement would be violently suppressed, as you would be forbidden from appearing unveiled in public, from conducting business, from leaving the house without permission,
or from attending the exciting political and theatrical life that is happening just outside your walls, leaving you to languish in the lonely, domestic shadows. Even in the most privileged household, the day-to-day reality of life in the gynaeconites is one of intellectual isolation and perpetual domestic labor, a life lived constantly under the supervision of your in-laws and slaves, with your value measured almost entirely by your ability to remain invisible, silent, and fertile, a profound denial of your modern, multifaceted identity.
Allow the heavy wool curtains of the gyneconitis to part now. Let the air flow freely through the divided chambers of the ancient house, and feel the tremendous sense of relief as the walls of that restrictive world fall away, leaving you unburdened by the crushing weight of gender expectations and legal dependency. You are free to define your own partnership, free to pursue your own education, and free to step out into the world without permission or chaperone, allowing the profound assurance of your personal sovereignty to become a source of ultimate relaxation.
Let the emotional coldness of the utilitarian marriage dissolve now, replaced by the warm, protective comfort of your modern relationship ideals, where intimacy and equality are the cornerstones of your shared life, guiding you deeper into a sleep that is completely your own. Let the walls of the domestic sphere completely recede into the darkness now, allowing your mind to ascend toward the vast, indifferent sky, where the ancient Greek belief system would impose a new, pervasive layer of psychological anxiety upon your daily existence, a constant,
low-grade fear rooted in the absolute certainty that the natural world, human fortune, and even your personal health are directly and frequently manipulated by the demands and the often petty whims of powerful, immortal deities. You would live in a world utterly devoid of modern scientific determinism, where every unexplained phenomenon, the sudden onset of a devastating plague, the unexpected sinking of a merchant ship in a summer squall, a failed harvest, or even a sudden stroke of good fortune is immediately attributed not to natural causes, but to the personal pleasure or the divine anger of an Olympic god or a lesser spirit. Imagine the emotional exhaustion of having to constantly monitor your behavior for any inadvertent slight that might offend a member of the powerful pantheon, knowing that if you neglect to perform the correct ritual sacrifice, or if you accidentally pronounce the name of a god with too much casual disregard,
or if you simply appear too proud or successful, the vengeful response from Zeus, Poseidon, or Apollo could manifest as a catastrophic, life-altering event. The gods here are not distant, abstract figures of ultimate benevolence, but highly emotional, highly dramatic, and often deeply flawed reflections of humanity itself, prone to jealous rages, bitter rivalries, lustful indiscretions, and sudden, explosive acts of retribution, meaning that the cosmic forces governing your fate are utterly unpredictable and entirely beyond the control of rational thought.
This profound belief in divine caprice would introduce a paralyzing layer of anxiety to every major undertaking, requiring you to consult countless oracles, to interpret the flight patterns of birds, to examine the entrails of sacrificial animals, and to spend a significant portion of your limited resources on offerings and rituals designed to appease or bribe the powerful celestial beings into granting you temporary good favor. You would find yourself incapable of taking true, quiet credit for any personal achievement, for to brag too loudly about your wealth or your children or your military success would be seen as an act of hubris, a dangerous overstepping of human boundaries which would instantly draw the envious eye of the gods, almost guaranteeing a subsequent, dramatic downfall designed to humble you back into fearful obedience.
The pervasive, unrelenting reality of fate, or Moira, further compounds this psychological burden, for it is the belief that the core structure of your life, including the moment and manner of your death, is predetermined and inescapable, leading to a fatalistic acceptance of suffering and tragedy that your modern mind,
obsessed with personal agency and the power of intervention, would find deeply debilitating. There is no room in this worldview for the modern comforting belief that you are in charge of your own destiny, that hard work and rational planning will guarantee success, or that modern medicine will save you from disease, because every variable is ultimately subject to the whims of an immortal entity or the silent decree of a blind destiny, making preparation and planning feel inherently futile.
You would look at the stars not as distant, cold objects of scientific study, but as the visible, glittering map of your own predetermined doom, feeling the cold, heavy weight of the cosmos pressing down on your individual life, knowing that your existence is merely a small, temporary drama staged for the amusement or the instruction of forces far greater and far more dangerous than yourself.
Allow the glittering eyes of the ancient gods to dim now. Let the anxiety over forgotten sacrifices drift away, and let the crushing weight of fate be lifted from your chest. as you return to the quiet, rational certainty of your own time, where science provides explanations and where your personal choices genuinely impact your future.
Feel the profound lightness of knowing that a storm is merely meteorology, that a failed crop is an issue of soil chemistry, and that your life is primarily determined by your own decisions and the laws of probability.
Allowing the assurance of this rational order to become a source of ultimate, heavy, and uninterrupted rest.
Let the fear of the capricious gods fade into the quiet atmosphere around you, and focus now on the persistent, intimate battle with the temperature that would define your every waking and sleeping moment.
A relentless struggle against the cold and the damp that reveals the harsh reality of living without modern architectural insulation, heating systems, or waterproof technology. You would quickly discover that the mud brick and rubble walls of the ancient house are highly porous and provide almost no effective barrier against the elements, acting less like a sealed shield and more like a heavy sponge that absorbs the moisture and the temperature of the outside world.
Creating an indoor environment that is rarely more than a few degrees different from the weather outside. Imagine the deep, marrow-seeping chill of a Greek winter, where the air inside your dwelling is heavy with dampness, causing a pervasive cold that seems to cling to your skin and penetrate the thick, scratchy wool of your chiton,
leaving you in a constant state of mild shivering that consumes your energy and makes deep rest elusive. The only sources of heat are small, portable braziers filled with burning charcoal, which offer a limited, localized warmth that only serves to heat the small area immediately surrounding them, and these must be used sparingly because the charcoal produces smoke and dangerous carbon monoxide.
Meaning that you are forced to choose between slight warmth and clean air, a choice that modern civilization never asked you to make.
You would spend your days perpetually seeking the strongest patch of sunlight in the courtyard or huddling close to a smoky, meager fire, and your nights would be a drawn-out misery of attempting to find warmth under heavy, coarse wool blankets that smell faintly of the sheep they came from.
With the cold ground and the uninsulated walls sucking the heat from your body with merciless efficiency. This constant, low-grade physical discomfort of being either too hot and dusty in the summer or too cold and damp in the winter would lead to an exhaustion far greater than simple physical labor, because your body's thermoregulation system is always working overtime, perpetually stressed by an environment that offers no comfortable median, making deep, restorative relaxation almost impossible. When the sun finally sets and the vast, impenetrable blackness of the night descends upon the ancient world, you would then confront the secondary challenge of light, realizing immediately that the soft, abundant glow you are accustomed to is a tremendous, costly luxury that is simply not available to you here. The only means of illumination is the simple oil lamp, a small clay vessel filled with olive oil and a linen wick, which casts a small, flickering, dim light that barely reaches beyond the immediate radius of a small table, pushing the corners of the room into deep,
terrifying shadow and making any fine task or prolonged reading an intense strain on your eyes. This oil, which is the fuel for light, is also the fuel for cooking and the substance used for bathing, making it a precious and expensive commodity that must be carefully conserved, meaning that the moment the practical necessities of the day are concluded,
the lamp is extinguished to save cost, plunging the house into a profound and absolute darkness that your eyes can barely pierce. The consequence of this lack of cheap, abundant light is that your entire existence is necessarily compressed into the daylight hours, forcing you to rise with the sun and retire shortly after it sets, eliminating the possibility of the long, private evening hours that you use for intellectual pursuits, quiet contemplation, or social entertainment, restricting your life to the demanding, public rhythm of the solar cycle.
Furthermore, the oil lamp is not a clean, scentless light source, for the wick constantly smolders and smokes, filling the small, closed rooms with the irritating smell of burnt oil and fine soot that settles on every surface, including the inside of your nose and lungs, adding yet another layer of subtle, inescapable physical irritation to your nightly routine. Allow the chill of the damp wall to recede from your skin now. Let the smoke of the tiny oil lamp dissolve from the air, and feel the incredible, comforting warmth and security of the soft mattress beneath you and the insulated walls around you, acknowledging the profound, peaceful luxury of a home where the temperature is stable and the light is abundant and clean.
Feel the profound gratitude for your ability to control your environment, a power that the ancient Greeks could only dream of, and let this awareness of your current protected comfort become an anchor that pulls you down, down into a deep, heavy, and uninterrupted slumber. Allow the scent of the smoky oil lamps and the constant chill of the ancient night to completely recede, and focus now on the subtle, deep psychological challenge presented by the profound absence of entertainment and instantaneous communication, a reality that would leave your modern mind constantly stimulated and perpetually connected, feeling slow, bored, and utterly deprived of its necessary means of escape. You would find yourself in a world utterly lacking in mass media, with no electricity, no electronic screens, no recorded music, no personal libraries of easily accessible paperbacks, and no concept of a global network that delivers news from distant shores within seconds, meaning that the rich, dense tapestry of sensory and intellectual distraction that colors your modern life simply vanishes. Imagine the absolute silence of the evening after the oil lamp has been extinguished, a quiet broken only by the natural sounds of the night, a rustling of wind, the bark of a dog, the distant murmur of voices, a silence that forces your attention inward, leaving you with only your own unadorned thoughts, a lack of external stimulation that the modern mind finds intensely uncomfortable and unsettling. Your access to information would be agonizingly slow, entirely dependent on messengers walking or sailing for weeks to bring news of war or politics, or on a single, expensive written scroll that might take a skilled reader many hours to decipher, eliminating the swift, global awareness that defines your current understanding of the world, leaving you disconnected and geographically isolated. The primary forms of leisure available to you are communal and highly public, consisting mainly of attending religious festivals, engaging in philosophical debate in the agora, or perhaps, most famously, attending the theatre, which is a magnificent but infrequent event that requires intense focus and a large collective gathering, offering no opportunity for the quiet, personalized escape you crave. Even the process of reading is a demanding public act, for ancient texts were written without punctuation or spaces between words known as scriptio continua, requiring the reader to physically sound out the words aloud to parse the meaning, eliminating the possibility of the silent, rapid, and deeply private immersion in a book that is your modern form of effortless intellectual escape. The monotony of leisure would wear you down, as your social life revolves around repetitive, local interactions with the same small group of people, and your intellectual stimulation is limited by the availability of orators and the expense of scrolls, leading to a profound sense of mental stagnation and a dull, inescapable feeling that you are constantly missing out on the excitement of the wider world. You realize that your modern attention span, finely tuned by the relentless pace of video, rapid-fire headlines, and instant messaging, would feel painfully bored and profoundly restless in the slow, deliberate, unamplified world of ancient Greece, a psychological misalignment that would prevent you from finding peace in the measured, natural rhythm of life. Allow the pressure of that sensory deprivation to lift now. Let the slow, creeping boredom of the ancient evening dissolve into the comfort of the present, and acknowledge the profound freedom found in your current capacity to summon any image, any music, or any information from across the globe with a simple gesture, a luxury that provides a vital sanctuary for the modern mind. Feel the profound lightness of knowing that if your mind seeks rest, distraction is readily available, and let that gentle reassurance that you are completely connected and intellectually satisfied become the final, heavy anchor that pulls you down, down into a deep, uninterrupted, and profoundly restful sleep. Let the generalized fears of ancient life recede, and focus your attention now on a specific, terrifying moment in history, the beginning of the Great Peloponnesian War in 431 BC, when the powerful Spartan army began its annual invasion of Attica, forcing the entire rural population, the farmers, the villagers, the shepherds, and their livestock to seek refuge behind the mighty stone fortifications of the city of Athens, creating an immediate and catastrophic crisis of overcrowding and sanitation that would rapidly destroy the quality of life you have been struggling to maintain. Imagine the sudden, immense psychological shock of having the tens of thousands of people who lived scattered across the vast countryside suddenly packed shoulder to shoulder within the confined boundaries of the city walls, creating a massive, suffocating encampment where tents and crude wooden shacks are erected in every available public space in the narrow streets, in the marketplaces, and even squeezed between the massive architectural marvels like the temples and the theatres, turning the city into one vast, noisy, and deeply unsanitary refugee camp. You find yourself forced to sleep not on a hard bed in a quiet room,
but perhaps on a thin mat of straw laid directly upon the ground of a public square, or crammed onto the floor of a relative's already bursting house, surrounded by the constant,
overwhelming sounds of desperate conversation, the restless movements of thousands of displaced people, and the unceasing low-level din of animals that have been brought inside the walls for protection, making the achievement of true, uninterrupted rest a complete impossibility.
The most visible symbol of both Athens' defense and your current misery are the long walls, two massive, parallel fortifications stretching for miles that connect the city center to the port of Piraeus, walls that were designed to ensure that Athens could never be starved by a land siege,
but which now serve as the permanent, grey backdrop to your claustrophobic existence, enclosing you in a suffocating embrace of stone and fear. Every breath you take is now drawn from an atmosphere heavy with the combined, concentrated smells of sweat, fear, unwashed bodies, smoke from cooking fires, and the pervasive, sickening stench of raw sewage, for the sudden, immense surge in population has completely overwhelmed the city's rudimentary waste disposal systems,
leading to filth accumulating in every corner and stagnant water collecting in every depression in the unpaved streets. This catastrophic breakdown in basic sanitation, compounded by the constant stress and the weakened immune systems of the tightly packed population, created the perfect, horrifying conditions for the arrival of the Great Plague of Athens in the following year. A historical catastrophe that vividly demonstrates the ultimate fragility of ancient life and the speed with which a thriving civilization could be reduced to absolute chaos.
The plague strikes not with the slow, creeping dread of a drawn-out famine, but with the terrifying speed and brutality of a physical assault, a disease whose origins and nature remain a mystery, appearing suddenly and felling the strongest and wealthiest citizens just as easily as the poorest, instantly shattering the illusion of safety provided by the city walls and the democratic institutions. Imagine the sheer, paralyzing terror of the onset, beginning with a sudden, intense heat that burns in your head and eyes, followed immediately by a painful, sickening inflammation in your throat and tongue, making it impossible to swallow, leading to uncontrollable sneezing, a hacking cough, and a deep, agonizing chest pain that makes every breath feel like a desperate struggle for survival. As the disease progresses, your skin breaks out in terrible, raw sores and blisters, your body becomes racked by unstoppable vomiting and purging, and you are consumed by an unquenchable thirst that drives you to throw yourself into any water source available, even the contaminated pools in the street,
revealing the complete helplessness of ancient medicine against a viral or bacterial foe it could neither comprehend nor contain. You watch as the healers, the same physicians who treated with poultices and purges, are overwhelmed, contracting the disease and dying at a faster rate than the general population, leaving the sick abandoned and terrified, realizing that there is absolutely no sanctuary, no treatment,
and no logical explanation for the deadly force that is consuming your home and your community. The plague becomes the ultimate harsh reality because it destroys not only the physical body, but the social order itself, as the fear of contagion becomes so intense that all normal social and religious norms collapse, leading people to abandon the sick and the dying,
refusing to perform the customary burial rituals for fear of touching a contaminated corpse, leaving the bodies to pile up in houses and temples.
You witness the horrifying spectacle of desperate individuals, having lost all hope of divine or human aid, indulging in a frenzied, reckless pursuit of immediate pleasure and self-gratification, spending their remaining resources in acts of drunken revelry and lawlessness, believing that since punishment for wrongdoing might never come before death,
they are entirely free from the rules of society.
The weight of continuous, unavoidable death would press down on your psyche, forcing you to live in a constant state of anticipatory grief, realizing that the person you speak to today might be feverish and abandoned tomorrow, and that the only hope of survival lies in the utterly random chance that your body possesses a unique immunity, not in the power of prayer or the wisdom of science. Even if you were among the fortunate few who survived the initial onslaught of the disease, you would be left with a city permanently scarred, its population decimated, its leadership, including the great Pericles, gone, and its moral fabric irreparably torn,
leaving you to navigate a broken society where the trust between neighbors and the authority of the gods have been profoundly undermined by the shared, terrifying trauma.
This state of perpetual siege, poverty, and disease reveals the absolute fragility of the ancient state, demonstrating that the mighty walls, and the brilliant democracy of Athens were ultimately no match for the combination of human conflict and microbial warfare, showing you that the life you fought so hard to live was always just one sudden, catastrophic outbreak away from total anarchy and death.
Allow the terrifying heat of the ancient plague to drain entirely from your body now. Let the sounds of the desperate, crowded streets diminish to a silent, distant whisper, and feel the tremendous, quiet assurance of your own time, where public health is a science, where clean water flows freely from a tap, and where the presence of a vaccine or an antibiotic means that a simple fever is not a harbinger of doom.
Feel the deep, restorative relief of knowing that you are safe from the siege, safe from the plague, and safe from the moral collapse that accompanies such existential fear, allowing the contrast between that horror and your present security to settle into your muscles, pulling your entire body down into a heavy, uninterrupted slumber. Let the suffocating, plague-ridden walls of Athens crumble into dust now, and feel your mind gently shift across the rugged Peloponnese Peninsula, settling into the dry, austere valley of Laconia, where the complete absence of physical walls around the city of Sparta is a testament to the fact that its true defense lies not in stone and mortar, but in the terrifying, unyielding discipline and sacrifice of every single citizen.
If you were born here, you would immediately confront the ultimate, harshest reality of ancient Greece, the absolute and immediate annihilation of your personal identity and free will for every aspect of your life, from the moment of your birth until your death, is predetermined, managed, and controlled by the state, prioritizing the strength of the collective military machine above any individual comfort, desire, or familial love.
Imagine the psychological trauma of being brought before the elders upon your birth, where a public judgment is made on your physical fitness and apparent strength, determining whether you are deemed worthy of raising or whether you are to be exposed and left to die on a bleak hillside. A chilling assessment that denies you the most fundamental right to life, based solely on utilitarian calculation. The moment you reach the tender age of 7, you are ripped away from the warmth and love of your mother and your household, plunged abruptly into the agoge, the rigorous, state-mandated training program that is not merely a school but a continuous, brutal process of physical and emotional hardening, designed specifically to strip away all softness, fear, and private attachment. You would find yourself forced to live in communal barracks with dozens of other boys, enduring a life of perpetual exposure and manufactured hardship, where you are intentionally kept hungry and cold, encouraged to steal for sustenance, while knowing that failure or getting caught results in a savage public whipping. A psychological tactic intended to instill cunning, ruthlessness, and an absolute tolerance for pain. The uniform you wear is a single rough cloak that must serve you throughout the entire year, regardless of the scorching heat of summer or the biting cold of winter, and you are forbidden from using oil baths, instead washing in the cold Eurotas River. Processes designed to perpetually toughen your skin and eliminate any possibility of soft, effeminate comfort that might compromise your readiness for war as you progress through the agoge. Your intellectual education is strictly utilitarian, focusing not on philosophy, art, or rhetoric, but on concise, martial communication.
The deepest, most profound shock to your modern sensibilities would be the complete suppression of individual choice regarding career or marriage, for your only recognized profession is that of a soldier, a homoios or peer, and your eventual marriage is not a union of love, but a state-sanctioned procreative event,
which often requires you to sneak away from the barracks at night for brief, clandestine visits with your wife before returning to your communal sleeping quarters. Even as an adult citizen, you are forbidden from living at home with your wife and family until you are 30 years old, spending your entire adult life eating every meal at the communal mess hall, the Syssitia.
A practice that ensures your absolute loyalty remains with your unit and the state rather than with your private family interests, creating a permanent, institutionalized detachment from your own kin. Underpinning this entire, highly pressurized military machine is the constant, quiet, yet terrifying threat of the Helots, the massive population of enslaved Laconians whom the Spartans subjugated and whose labor is the sole foundation of the Spartan economy, forcing the Spartan citizen to live in perpetual fear of a slave revolt that could erupt at any moment and completely wipe out their small ruling class.
This fear is managed through a brutal, institutionalized campaign of terror and ritual murder, including the Crypteia, a secret, annual practice where young Spartan men are sent out into the countryside to murder any helots deemed too strong, too intelligent, or too prone to rebellion, maintaining the economic status quo through systematic preventative violence, a chilling reality that would shatter your modern moral compass. Imagine living every moment with the anxiety of the helots simmering beneath the surface, knowing that your dinner, your leisure, and your entire way of life is sustained by the brutal oppression of a population many times larger than your own,
creating a state of internal tension and military vigilance that never allows the mind to truly rest or relax. Your ultimate fate is determined entirely by your ability to maintain perfection in military discipline and adherence to the Spartan law. For any display of cowardice in battle, any failure to complete your training, or any public deviation from the stringent moral code results in your complete social annihilation, forcing you into a humiliating status of hypomyanes, or inferiors, stripped of your rights and forced to wear the mark of shame. Allow the unyielding bronze shield and the oppressive weight of the Spartan uniform to fall away from you now. Let the sharp, hungry cold of the barracks vanish, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of unrestricted, personal choice, knowing that your worth is not measured by your ability to kill or endure pain, but by the quiet cultivation of your own unique interests and relationships. Settle back into the deep, sweet comfort of your modern individuality, where you are free to love your family openly, free to choose your own profession, and free to pursue knowledge and comfort without the constant, terrifying presence of the state's demanding eye, allowing this profound sense of self-possession to sink into your bones and pull you down into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. Allow the rigid discipline of Sparta and the psychological weight of the helot threat to dissipate entirely, and focus your mind now on the profound, physical difficulty of movement in the ancient Greek world, where the very act of traveling, whether by land or by sea, was not a swift, comfortable journey, but a demanding, often dangerous, and perpetually uncertain ordeal that would constantly test the limits of your endurance and patience. You would quickly realize that the mountainous, fractured geography of Greece, a complex, chaotic landscape of steep ravines, narrow passes, and rugged coastlines, was the primary obstacle to unity and communication, making the construction of long, paved roads virtually impossible and forcing every single short journey to become an intensive, vertical hike that demands exceptional physical conditioning. Imagine the necessity of walking everywhere, day after exhausting day, over unpaved, uneven, dust-choked tracks that wear down your simple leather sandals and leave your feet perpetually blistered and your calves aching. A reality where even the most basic task of visiting a neighboring town or overseeing a distant farm demands hours of strenuous physical effort, eliminating the convenience of mechanized transport. The roads you do encounter are not patrolled or maintained by a central authority, but are often little more than goat trails, making them vulnerable to the constant, endemic threat of bandits and highwaymen who lurk in the wilderness and the narrow mountain passes, requiring you to arm yourself, travel in wary groups, and continuously maintain a high level of vigilance against ambush, turning every journey into a low-level military expedition. When travel by land becomes too arduous, you turn to the sea, which appears deceptively smooth and inviting, but presents its own constellation of unique and terrifying dangers. For the ancient mariner was acutely aware that the Aegean and Mediterranean are shallow, treacherous bodies of water prone to sudden, violent storms that can rise with almost no warning, transforming the calm surface into a ship-shattering maelstrom within minutes. Imagine being crammed onto a small, open-decked merchant vessel, relying entirely on the unreliable power of the wind and the brute strength of rowers, feeling the terrifying vulnerability of a wooden hull against a massive, dark wave, knowing that if the storm catches you far from a visible landmark, there is no coast guard, no GPS, and no rescue, only the cold, consuming power of the sea god Poseidon's indifferent rage. The necessity of coastal navigation meant that the entire ancient maritime economy relied on remaining within sight of the shore, forcing long and circuitous routes that added days or weeks to a journey that might otherwise be direct. And the fear of the open sea meant that trade and communication virtually halted during the winter months, when the dangerous weather forced ships to remain moored in port. This profound difficulty of travel would severely limit your ability to maintain distant friendships or conduct large-scale business, forcing your world to shrink to the immediate orbit of your own city-state, creating a sense of isolation where news, cultural trends, and even the simple exchange of letters moved at a glacial,
unpredictable pace, reinforcing the insular, competitive nature of each polis, even the relatively short distance between two major cities, a journey that your modern transport system might cover in a single relaxing hour, required days of intense, uncomfortable, and potentially life-threatening movement, a tyranny of distance that would relentlessly wear down the modern expectation of effortless access and ubiquitous connectivity.
Allow the uneven, dusty road to flatten beneath your feet now. Let the salty fear of the open, stormy sea wash away entirely, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of instantaneous movement and communication. Acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where you can traverse a continent in hours and where your loved ones are only a clear, reliable signal away. Settle back into the deep comfort of your present security, where travel is measured in hours rather than in weeks of physical struggle and moral peril. And let that awareness of your protected, effortless mobility become the anchor that pulls you down, down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the dust of the bandit-ridden roads and the spray of the treacherous sea to completely settle, and turn your attention inward once more to the quiet, constant source of low-grade dissatisfaction that would permeate your ancient life, the profound monotony of the daily diet,
A reality that would leave your modern palate accustomed to a world of infinite flavor and texture, feeling perpetually deprived and intensely restless.
You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that the very concept of a balanced, varied, and exciting meal where dishes are drawn from global ingredients, seasoned with dozens of complex spices, and prepared using sophisticated chemical processes simply does not exist, leaving your culinary life centered on a narrow, unrelenting rotation of a few basic, local staples that rarely change from season to season.
The true anchor of your existence is the ubiquitous barley bread, which is often coarse, unleavened, and difficult to chew, providing the essential dense carbohydrate fuel required for heavy manual labor, but offering little joy. And you would consume this bread at every single meal, day after day.
Year after year, until the smell and the texture of it becomes an almost irritating background hum to your life.
Your primary sources of protein and fat are the salty, pungent olives and their rich oil, which is used for everything from bathing to cooking, and the sharp, foam goat or sheep cheese, a deeply flavored, preserved dairy that substitutes for the variety of meats and processed fats you rely on, creating an intense, repetitive, and often overwhelming flavor profile that quickly becomes tiresome to the unaccustomed tongue. The greatest psychological shock is the absolute absence of refined sugar, that pervasive, addictive substance that powers your modern economy and your nervous system, meaning that the quick,
clean rush of energy and the intense satisfaction of simple sweetness is a sensory experience you would mourn every hour of your existence.
When sweetness is desired, your only available luxury is the thick, golden honey, which is difficult to harvest, expensive to buy, and possesses a strong, floral flavor that cannot substitute for the neutral, versatile sweetness of cane sugar, or the occasional pleasure of naturally sweet, sun-dried figs and grapes, which are themselves seasonal and consumed with careful rationing. Imagine the deep, unrelenting psychological craving that sets in when your body is systematically denied the quick comfort of sugar, leading to a constant, low-level physical anxiety and a state of intense, focus-shattering desire for the simple pleasure of a modern pastry, a chocolate bar, or a glass of ice-cold, sweetened beverage. The lack of cheap, reliable methods of preserving and transporting perishable goods means that your access to fresh meat is extremely limited, usually reserved only for public sacrifices during festivals or the occasional slaughter of a domestic animal,
forcing the vast majority of your diet to remain strictly vegetarian and reliant on dried, salted, or pickled preparations that offer no sensory escape from their heavy brine.
Even the process of drinking is monotonous, for your daily fluid intake revolves around the diluted, acidic wine, which serves as a necessary agent for killing waterborne bacteria, meaning that you are never truly able to enjoy the refreshing purity of cold, flavorless water, existing instead in a state of perpetual, mild alcoholic dullness that coats your palate and dulls your senses. This culinary simplicity is not a conscious choice for a quiet, minimalist lifestyle, but an unavoidable necessity dictated by geography, technology, and economic hardship, leading to a life where food is merely fuel and the profound pleasure and cultural ritual of a diverse,
delicious meal is a completely absent luxury that would leave the modern soul feeling permanently undernourished in spirit. Allow the sharp, pungent taste of the ancient cheese and the coarse texture of the barley bread to dissolve completely from your awareness. Let the craving for sweetness subside into a calm, gentle stillness, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of culinary freedom, the knowledge that within moments you can select any flavor, any texture, and any ingredient from across the globe to satisfy your palate. Settle back into the deep, sweet comfort of your protected environment, where food is abundant, diverse, and delightful, allowing the luxurious complexity of your modern diet to become the final, satisfying thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the craving for complex flavors and the monotony of the ancient diet to gently fade from your awareness, and focus now on the unique, exhausting psychological stress imposed by the primitive and high-risk nature of ancient finance, a reality where the immense burden of protecting your wealth, managing debt,
and conducting commerce rested entirely on your own vulnerable shoulders, with none of the invisible protections you take for granted today.
You would be constantly confronted by the fact that your wealth is not an abstract, digital number safely stored on a server, but a physical, heavy commodity, a collection of silver or gold coins, drachmas, or status that must be physically guarded and carried with you, creating a perpetual anxiety about theft,
loss, and the necessity of burying your savings in a clay pot beneath your floor, hoping that no one observes your secret ritual. Imagine the sheer physical effort required to conduct large transactions, involving the slow, meticulous process of counting, weighing, and inspecting every single coin to ensure its purity and check for fraudulent clipping or debasement, a necessary, exhausting ritual that eliminates the swift, effortless nature of modern payment systems and requires you to become your own skeptical expert on metallurgy.
The concept of a secure, public commercial bank that would safely store your money and offer standardized credit is either non-existent or embryonic and highly risky, meaning that if you suffer a robbery or a fire, your entire life savings can be wiped out instantly.
With absolutely no insurance or governmental body to cushion the catastrophic loss, forcing you to bear the full, immediate consequences of every accident or act of violence. If you are a merchant, every single voyage your ship undertakes is a venture into high-stakes speculation, for there are no major marine insurance companies to protect your cargo against storm or piracy, compelling you to rely on risky,
individualized bottom-line loans, a primitive form of risk-sharing where the lender only gets repaid if the ship actually completes its voyage, a financial gamble that could bankrupt you in a single, unforeseen disaster at sea.
The psychological weight of the peril of debt would be immense and chillingly personal, for while the Athenian democracy had abolished the most extreme forms of debt slavery, borrowing money still carries terrifying risks, as high interest rates and the lack of comprehensive bankruptcy laws meant that failure to repay could result in the loss of your entire property, the dissolution of your family unit, and even the social degradation of your status as a citizen. You would find yourself operating in an economic environment where trust is scarce and formal contracts are fragile, relying instead on personal reputation and honor to secure credit, meaning that a single public failure or a perceived moral lapse could instantly destroy your credibility and access to funds,
creating a constant, exhausting pressure to maintain an impeccable, visible facade of trustworthiness. Even the simple act of lending money is fraught with personal tension, as there are no established, powerful collection agencies, forcing the lender to personally confront and pursue the debtor, often involving intense public arguments and social shaming in the agora, transforming a simple financial transaction into a bitter,
high-stakes personal rivalry that permanently fractures community relations. The greatest contrast to your modern world is the absolute lack of specialized financial services, no retirement plans, no long-term savings accounts, no government bonds, and no stock markets as you know them, meaning that your entire strategy for old age and security rests solely on the physical accumulation of land, livestock,
and coinage, a visible, tangible, and highly vulnerable asset base. Allow the heavy weight of the silver coins and the constant fear of the highwayman to lift from your shoulders. Let the paralyzing anxiety over high-interest loans and shipwrecks dissipate entirely, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of financial security, the knowledge that your wealth is protected by encrypted databases,
that your risks are mitigated by insurance,
and that debt does not carry the terrifying threat of social ruin. Settle back into the deep comfort of your modern, abstract financial system, where your personal savings are invisibly and securely guarded, allowing the assurance of this stable, low-risk economy to become the final, grounding element that pulls your entire body down, down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the anxieties of ancient finance and the heavy weight of the silver coin to completely dissipate now, and focus your mind instead on the profound challenges related to communication and knowledge access, a reality that would leave your modern brain accustomed to instantaneous, global information,
feeling intellectually isolated and perpetually hindered by the barriers of language and literacy.
You would be forced to confront the harsh realization that the vast majority of the population, even within a supposedly advanced city like Athens, is functionally illiterate, meaning that the intellectual life and complex political arguments you value are confined to a tiny elite who possess the time, the wealth,
and the social standing to acquire an education, immediately barring you from true communal participation. Even if you were among the privileged few who possess the ability to read, the very act of engaging with a text would be a strenuous, demanding effort entirely unlike the fluid, silent experience of modern reading. For the ancient scroll or volume contained text written in scriptio continua,
a continuous block of letters without any spaces between words, punctuation marks, or capitalization. Imagine the intense mental strain required to constantly decipher these dense blocks of letters, forcing you to physically sound out the words aloud to parse their meaning, turning every reading session into a slow, audible, and physically exhausting act of translation, eliminating the quiet, rapid immersion that allows your modern mind to effortlessly absorb information in silence.
The expense and scarcity of books would further limit your intellectual freedom, for every single scroll had to be painstakingly copied by hand onto fragile papyrus, making them prohibitively costly and rare, meaning that the great works of philosophy, history, and science were not readily available in every home, but were instead locked away in private collections or inaccessible public libraries. This lack of mass-produced, affordable literature would mean that your exposure to ideas is primarily oral and public, relying on the often biased filter of an orator speaking in the agora or a poet performing at a festival, rather than the quiet, contemplative solitude of engaging directly with the author's written word, making independent. Beyond the challenges of reading, you would also be confronted by the significant barriers of dialect and linguistic difference that existed between the various Greek city-states, realizing that the Greek language was not a single, universally interchangeable tongue, but a collection of distinct dialects Doric, Ionic, Aeolic that often made verbal communication between people from different regions difficult or even impossible. If you were a trader from Athens, your ability to negotiate in the Doric-speaking regions of Sparta or Corinth would be severely hampered, requiring careful articulation and constant repetition, creating a persistent, low-level anxiety of miscommunication that stifled trade, fostered mutual suspicion, and reinforced the intense, insular rivalry between the different polis.
The isolation imposed by this lack of a universally accepted, simplified language and the physical difficulty of disseminating written information meant that cultural and technological advances moved at a painfully slow pace. For the instantaneous transfer of revolutionary ideas that defines your modern world was rendered impossible by the tyranny of distance and the inefficiency of the written word. This perpetual feeling of being intellectually starved and linguistically isolated would be a profound hardship for the modern mind, which relies so heavily on the instant access to vast organized libraries of information and the seamless ability to communicate across continental boundaries, leading to a deep, frustrating sense of being cut off from the global flow of knowledge.
Allow the blurred, unpunctuated lines of the ancient scroll to sharpen into clarity now. Let the frustrating differences between the dialects disappear into a single, understandable silence, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of universal literacy and instantaneous information access, acknowledging the profound luxury of a world where knowledge is cheap, abundant, and easily shared. Settle back into the deep comfort of your fully connected world, where the written word flows effortlessly and ideas travel at the speed of light, allowing the assurance of this intellectual liberation to become the final, satisfying thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the quiet frustration of linguistic isolation and the dense, unpunctuated text of the ancient scroll to completely fade from your mind, and bring your focus back to the immediate, unavoidable physical discomfort that would incessantly plague your ancient existence, the constant, low-level irritation of poor hygiene and the pervasive, inescapable presence of parasites and pests that treat your body and your home as their permanent sanctuary.
You would quickly realize that the sweet, clean-smelling freshness you associate with yourself and your environment is a fragile, modern illusion, for the technology and materials needed for true cleanliness simply do not exist in abundance, leaving your skin and clothing in a state of perpetual partial cleanliness that is just barely adequate for survival.
Imagine the overwhelming, concentrated odor of the ancient city streets, a composite smell that is a noxious, laid blend of human and animal waste left in the gutters, the rancid oil used for cooking and bathing, the smoke from thousands of charcoal fires, and the heavy,
unwashed scent of dense crowds of people whose clothing has not been fully cleaned in weeks or months.
The fundamental issue lies in the lack of true soap, that miraculous chemical compound that allows fat and dirt to dissolve in water. Instead, you rely on the process of smearing your body with olive oil and then scraping of the resulting grime with a metal strigil, a process that removes the superficial dirt, but leaves behind a persistent, greasy film on your skin that quickly captures the dust and sweat of the day.
Washing your thick woolen tunic is an arduous, infrequent task, requiring large quantities of water, hours of physical beating and scrubbing with harsh lye or potash, and days of drying time, meaning that your clothes are perpetually stained, smelly, and stiff with accumulated body odor and dirt,
creating a source of continuous, abrasive irritation against your skin. Compounding this external grime is the unrelenting, subtle war against parasites that would consume a shocking amount of your mental and physical energy, for the close proximity of people and animals, the scarcity of fresh water,
and the lack of insecticidal treatments means that your body and your bed are the constant target of fleas, lice, and bedbugs. Imagine the profound, maddening difficulty of trying to concentrate on a serious political debate or trying to achieve quiet contemplation, all while enduring the non-stop, itchy distraction of fleas perpetually leaping and biting your legs, or the insidious, crawling sensation of lice making their home in your hair and clothing.
Pests that carry not only discomfort, but also the very real danger of transmitting deadly fevers and diseases. Even your sleep would be perpetually disrupted by this tiny, relentless warfare. As the bedbugs that infest your straw mattress emerge at night to feed, leaving your skin in a state of constant, inflamed discomfort, forcing you to scratch and rub against your rough blankets, ensuring that you never achieve the deep, still, restorative repose that your modern body requires. Furthermore, the lack of modern pest control means that your house is often shared with mice and rats, rodents that contaminate your limited stores of grain, chew on your leather goods, and introduce the lurking threat of plague and leptospirosis, creating a continuous,
low-level anxiety about contamination and waste that your modern, sterile environment has entirely eliminated. This harsh reality of constant physical irritation, the smell, the itch, the ache, the dirt would fundamentally prevent the modern person from ever achieving the state of calm, mental equilibrium necessary for high-level intellectual or creative work, because the body is always loudly complaining, demanding attention, and refusing to settle into stillness. Allow the persistent, irritating itch of the ancient parasites to completely vanish from your body. Let the overwhelming stench of the ancient street dissolve into fresh, clean air, and feel the incredible, profound comfort of soap, hot water, and silent, pest-free cleanliness, acknowledging the immense luxury of a life where your skin is smooth and your mind is free from the distraction of constant itching. Settle back into the deep, sweet comfort of your modern hygiene, where you allow the constant, irritating itch of the fleas and the pervasive odor of the ancient streets to completely vanish from your awareness, and focus your mind now on the ultimate,
existential threat that faced nearly every ancient woman and defined the limits of female vulnerability, the terrifying, high-stakes event of childbirth without the intervention of modern medicine, anesthesia, or sanitation.
You would be forced to confront the chilling, unromanticized reality that the process of bringing a new life into the world was, for the ancient woman, the most dangerous act of her life, a harrowing physical ordeal often performed in a dark, Confined space with only the assistance of an experienced but technologically primitive midwife, a reality where the risk of fatal hemorrhage, infection, or prolonged, obstructed labor was an ever-present, terrifying certainty. Imagine the immense, raw agony of labor without access to anesthesia or effective pain relief, enduring hours of blinding, continuous contraction with only herbal teas or strong wine to dull the edges of the suffering, knowing that if the process deviates even slightly from the norm, the resulting complications could lead to a swift, agonizing death that the midwife is entirely powerless to prevent.
The sheer, overwhelming lack of sanitation surrounding the birth chamber would be a silent killer, for the concept of germ theory is millennia away, meaning that the hands of the midwife, the cutting tool, and the bed linens are all unsterilized and teeming with unseen pathogens that easily enter the exhausted mother's bloodstream or the open umbilical cord of the newborn, frequently leading to puerperal fever or childbed fever, which was a common, rapid, and often fatal infection. Even if the mother survives the initial ordeal, the most devastating psychological weight of the ancient world is the profound, constant, and inescapable threat of infant mortality. A brutal reality that dictates that up to 1/4 to 1/3 of all children born will not survive to see their 5th birthday, succumbing to common illnesses like fever, diarrhea, or respiratory infection that your modern world considers trivial.
Imagine the agonizing emotional detachment required to raise a child while subconsciously knowing that your intense love and devotion could be rendered meaningless overnight by a sudden, spiking fever or bout of dysentery, forcing ancient parents to develop a stoic, defensive emotional reserve to guard against the constant,
inevitable trauma of loss. The cultural and religious pressures surrounding the birth are immense, for the newborn child is not automatically considered a citizen or even fully a member of the family until several days after its birth, a period of limbo and uncertainty designed to allow the weakest infants to pass away without the family investing too much grief or religious rite in their short existence. If the child is a daughter, there is the further, chilling possibility of exposure, where the father, exercising his absolute legal right, might decide that the family cannot afford to raise a female who requires a dowry and provides no political benefit,
leading to the unthinkable act of the infant being abandoned outside the city walls to the elements or to chance adoption, a decision that destroys all modern concepts of parental duty.
The relentless expectation to produce male heirs would further compound the woman's vulnerability, for her social value is intrinsically tied to her fertility and her ability to provide the state with future soldiers and citizens, creating a profound,
terrifying pressure that makes every pregnancy a high-stakes gamble with her own life and social status. Allow the terrifying vulnerability of the ancient birth chamber to completely dissipate now. Let the chilling, stoic fear of infant loss fade entirely from your mind, and feel the immense, quiet relief of modern obstetrics and pediatric care, acknowledging the profound blessing of antibiotics, anesthesia,
and the sterile environment that has rendered childbirth a safe, joyous, and reliable event.
Settle back into the deep comfort of your protective world, where the survival of your children is virtually guaranteed and your personal value is not tied to your reproductive success, allowing this assurance of medical security to become the final, grounding thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep.
Bed is a sanctuary and your clothing is soft, allowing the assurance of this physical purity to become the final, satisfying thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the raw, existential terror of the birth chamber and the high mortality rates to completely dissipate now, and focus your mind instead on the profound, immediate danger posed by the ancient legal system, a terrifying public arena where your freedom, your property, and your honor are constantly at risk.
Without the safety nets of professional representation or modern due process that define your current understanding of justice, you would be forced to navigate a legal landscape where there are no professional lawyers or dedicated prosecutors in the modern sense, meaning that if you are accused of a crime or need to bring a suit against another person, you are legally required to represent yourself to stand alone before the thousands of citizens who form the jury and deliver your own defense speech, a psychological ordeal that would shatter your modern sense of security. Imagine the immense, paralyzing pressure of having to speak publicly for hours to a massive, easily swayed jury of your peers, knowing that your case depends entirely on your personal oratorical skill. your ability to evoke sympathy, and the strength of your reputation.
A terrifying contest of rhetoric where evidence and technical legal points often take a back seat to emotional appeal and political maneuvering. The very concept of a neutral, objective police force to conduct investigations is entirely absent, meaning that the burden of gathering all evidence, finding all witnesses, and conducting all necessary inquiries falls entirely upon you, the litigant, forcing you to act as your own detective, prosecutor,
and defense attorney in a complex, high-stakes battle that consumes all your time and resources.
If you are a wealthy man in Athens, you face the additional, terrifying risk that a rival might file a sycophantia or vexatious lawsuit against you, accusing you of tax evasion or treason, not because they believe you are guilty, but purely to force you into a crippling court battle that consumes your finances and reputation, or to force you into a financial settlement to make the accusation disappear, a legalized form of extortion that keeps the wealthy in a state of perpetual anxiety.
The proceedings themselves are incredibly short and brutal, often lasting only a single day, with strictly limited time allotted for both the accusation and the defense, forcing you to compress the entire, complex reality of your life and your case into a few rushed, high-pressure hours, ensuring that justice is swift but often profoundly superficial and highly susceptible to persuasive sophistry. Furthermore, you would confront the chilling, dehumanizing reality of testimony from slaves, who were not permitted to speak freely in court because their evidence was considered unreliable, meaning that the only way to obtain their testimony was through torture.
A process sanctioned by law and conducted publicly to ensure that the information given was deemed truthful.
Imagine the moral horror of attending a trial where the core facts of the case are being established by information brutally extracted from a suffering, bound human being, a grotesque reality that forces you to participate in a system where the pursuit of truth is predicated on absolute physical cruelty,
revealing the ultimate, terrifying fault line in the ancient concept of justice. The penalties imposed by this system are often immediate, severe, and absolute, ranging from the immediate confiscation of your property and civic degradation to the irreversible judgment of exile or death by hemlock, with no long, drawn-out appeals process, ensuring that the verdict of the single-day trial carries a finality that would paralyze your modern sense of fairness and due process.
Allow the terrifying pressure of the crowded, shouting court to recede now. Let the anxiety of self-representation vanish, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of professional legal representation and due process, acknowledging the profound blessing of a justice system where the rules are written, where testimony is freely given,
and where your freedom is not dependent on the strength of your rhetorical skill.
Settle back into the deep comfort of your protected environment, where the police investigate and lawyers argue, allowing the assurance of this modern, structured legal security to become the final, grounding thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the terrifying formality of the ancient courtroom and the immediate threat of legal ruin to recede entirely, and focus your mind instead on the constant, grinding psychological stress imposed by the absolute absence of personal privacy, a fundamental condition of ancient Greek life that would leave your modern soul,
which relies on sanctuary and solitude, feeling perpetually exposed and mentally exhausted.
You would be forced to realize that the very concept of privacy, that protected, isolated space where you can be truly alone, think unmonitored thoughts, and express unedited emotions, is virtually non-existent, for the architecture of the ancient home is designed around the central courtyard,
ensuring that almost every private action is visible or audible to the rest of the household, including family, slaves, and any visiting guests.
Imagine the immense difficulty of managing your personal frustrations, your grief, or your moments of weakness, knowing that every sigh, every tear, and every argument is immediately witnessed and judged by the entire domestic unit, eliminating the possibility of the quiet,
self-contained emotional processing that is vital for your modern mental health. The streets themselves offer no refuge, for the doors and windows of houses are often open to catch the breeze, and the majority of live cooking, cleaning, socializing, and debate is conducted in public view, ensuring that you are constantly under the perpetual gaze of your neighbors and peers,
living every moment as if under the constant scrutiny of an unspoken communal surveillance system.
This constant, unrelenting visibility transforms reputation into your most fragile and valuable asset, for your standing in the community is not based on your private virtues, but on the public perception of your honor, piety, and commitment to civic duty, meaning that a single misstep, a public display of drunkenness, or an overheard rumor can instantly destroy your career and your social standing. The ultimate mechanism of social control is the potent, terrifying power of public shame or ADOS, a cultural force so powerful that the fear of public ridicule often holds more sway over behavior than the fear of legal punishment, driving citizens to adhere strictly to social norms to avoid the catastrophic consequence of being mocked, shunned, or permanently disgraced in the agora.
Imagine the psychological torment of being the victim of public, ritualized satire or comedy in the theater, where a playwright uses your actual name, mocks your physical appearance, and mercilessly dissects your personal flaws before thousands of laughing citizens.
An authorized and deeply humiliating form of character assassination that permanently taints your name and your legacy.
This inability to escape the collective judgment means that you can never truly shed your public persona or retreat to a safe, private corner to recover, forcing you into a continuous, exhausting state of social performance where every movement and every word is carefully calibrated to manage the relentless demands of the community's critical eye.
The simple, profound relief of being anonymous, the ability to walk into a modern city and be just one person among millions, unnoticed and free from the scrutiny of a small, interconnected community, is a luxury that is completely unimaginable in the dense, tightly knit society of ancient Athens.
Leaving you trapped in a psychological cage of perpetual self-consciousness. Allow the constant, critical gaze of your ancient neighbors to gently fade away now. Let the intense pressure of public performance dissolve entirely from your mind, and feel the immense, quiet relief of modern privacy and anonymity, acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where you can close your door.
Disconnect your communication and be entirely, safely, and truly alone.
Settle back into the deep comfort of your personal sanctuary, where your inner life is your own and your worth is not dependent on the immediate, fickle judgment of a constantly watching crowd. Allowing the assurance of this unburdened, private freedom to become the final,
grounding thought that pulls your entire body down, down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep.
Allow the psychological burden of public shame and the constant, critical gaze of your ancient neighbors to completely dissipate now, and bring your focus instead to the profound, persistent physical exhaustion that defines the life of the ancient craftsman, an intense, repetitive toil that would rapidly break down the modern body accustomed to ergonomic comfort, specialized tools, and frequent, paid rest. You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that every single object of necessity, the ceramic bowls, the iron tools, the leather sandals, the marble blocks, is produced through slow, brute force manual labor, demanding hours upon hours of continuous, focused exertion using only the simplest and most inefficient tools, ensuring that your days are long, hard, and relentlessly physically demanding. Imagine the exhausting monotony of working in a smoky, poorly ventilated blacksmith shop, standing over a scorching furnace, swinging a heavy hammer onto hot metal, feeling the jarring impact travel up your arm and into your shoulder with every repetitive blow.
Knowing that the quality and quantity of your output is entirely dependent on the continuous, unwavering application of your own muscle and endurance. If you are a potter, you spend your day hunched over a heavy, manually spun wheel, pulling clay into shape with intense concentration, enduring the pain in your lower back and the perpetual stiffness in your neck. Or perhaps you are constantly fetching and kneading the heavy, wet clay, or struggling to lift the kiln-fired ceramics, tasks that create chronic, unavoidable strains on your ligaments and joints. The modern concept of ergonomics and workplace safety is utterly non-existent, meaning that you work in positions that damage your body squatting on a low stool, bending at sharp angles, or enduring continuous exposure to sharp metal shavings and irritating plaster dust leading to inevitable, early-onset arthritis, permanent spinal deformation,
and chronic, debilitating pain in your hands and knees.
This physical deterioration is compounded by the lack of specialized, power-assisted tools. There are no electric saws, no lathes driven by motors, and no sophisticated measuring instruments, forcing you to use hand files, rough chisels, and simple bow drills for every intricate task, requiring immense patience and an exhausting level of muscular control to achieve accuracy. The economic pressure is relentless, for the price of your finished goods is determined by the open market, and your ability to compete against the labor of slaves and other free men means that you must maintain a breakneck pace of production from dawn until dusk, without the modern luxury of sick days, paid vacation, or the expectation of a standardized 8-hour workday, ensuring that your body is always operating at the threshold of physical collapse. Furthermore, the lack of a retirement system means that you must continue this intense physical labor until your body simply gives out, knowing that your financial survival in old age depends entirely on the continuous function of your hands and eyes, creating a terrifying pressure to avoid injury and to push through pain, as a broken leg or failing vision could mean immediate destitution. The noise and chaos of the workshop itself would contribute to your exhaustion, as the constant clang of the hammer, the shouts of the apprentices, the grating of stone against metal, and the heat radiating from the forge combine to create a harsh, sensory environment that leaves your ears ringing and your head aching, preventing the mental calm necessary for deep focus. Allow the incessant clang of the hammer and the abrasive dust of the ancient workshop to completely vanish from your awareness. Let the strain in your lower back and the stiffness in your joints fully dissolve, and feel the immense, quiet relief of modern ergonomics and mechanized tools, acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where your labor is assisted by power and your body is protected by safety regulations. Settle back into the deep comfort of your protected environment, where work is often mental rather than purely physical, and where the heavy lifting is done by machines, allowing the assurance of this bodily security and technological assistance to become the final, grounding thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. Allow the constant clang of the craftsman's hammer and the pervasive, grinding strain of manual labor to completely dissipate now, and bring your focus instead to the profound, existential terror of ancient Greek warfare, a reality that would force your modern body, accustomed to distance and automated weaponry, into the terrifying, intimate brutality of the hoplite phalanx, where survival hinges on the shared, desperate courage of your immediate neighbors. You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that as a citizen, you are also, by default, a soldier, expected to drop your farming tools or your philosophical texts at a moment's notice, to don the heavy, expensive bronze armor, the panoply that is your most valuable possession, and to march for days across difficult terrain, enduring the relentless exhaustion of carrying over 70 pounds of metal and wood under the unforgiving heat of the Mediterranean sun. Imagine the immense physical drain of this continuous marching, the friction of the bronze breastplate chafing your skin, the weight of the massive, concave aspis shield digging into your shoulder, and the relentless pressure on your feet as you move over rocks and dust, ensuring that you arrive at the battlefield already in a state of deep, aching fatigue, long before the deadly combat even begins. The true moment of horror is the immediacy of the clash, where the disciplined, slow march of the two opposing phalanxes suddenly accelerates into a crashing impact, forcing you into a single, terrifying line where you are pressed shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, forming an impenetrable wall of bronze shields. A living, breathing, weaponized block of flesh and metal. You would experience the sickening, physical reality of the Athismos, or the Great Push, where the battle is decided not by skillful swordsmanship, but by the relentless, coordinated shove of thousands of desperate men. A brutal scrum where you are crushed against the shield of the man next to you, enduring the immense, crushing weight of the entire formation pushing forward, forcing you to fight for every inch of ground. The sound of this clash would be deafening and terrifying, a cacophony of cracking wood, scraping metal, desperate shouts, and the visceral screams of the wounded, a sensory overload that overwhelms your capacity for rational thought and reduces your existence to the primal, terrifying instinct of maintaining your place in the line and ensuring the protection of your right-hand neighbor. Your only weapon is the long, heavy dory spear, which you must thrust forward into the tiny gaps in the enemy's shield wall, knowing that the engagement is entirely close quarters, a matter of seconds, where the difference between life and death is measured in the briefest hesitation or the slightest shift in the shield line, guaranteeing that you witness the immediate, brutal dismemberment and death of the man directly in front of you. If you are wounded, struck by a spear, or cut by a bronze sword, the pain is absolute, and the reality of ancient battlefield medicine is immediate despair. for there are no sterile field hospitals, no blood transfusions, and no antibiotics,
meaning that a deep puncture wound or a fractured limb is often a guaranteed death sentence from shock, uncontrolled hemorrhage, or inevitable infection. Imagine lying on the hard, bloody ground after the push, enduring the agony of a serious wound, knowing that your only hope lies in being carried off by a slave or a surviving comrade, with the subsequent treatment consisting only of crude linen bandages. The application of wine to the wound and the intense, paralyzing pain of a wound being stitched or probed by tools that are far from clean. The psychological trauma of this intimate, face-to-face brutality would be overwhelming and permanent, forcing you to kill men you can see, hear, and even smell, leaving you with an invisible wound, moral and emotional scar that would be entirely unrecognized by your society, which demands that the surviving soldier return home a hardened hero, offering no space for the processing of grief or the silent horror of the violence witnessed. Allow the terrifying crash of the phalanx and the intense, crushing weight of the bronze armor to completely dissipate now. Let the shouts and the agonizing cries of the wounded fade into a deep, pervasive silence, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of modern distance and medical safety. Acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where warfare is specialized and the majority of injuries are survivable. Settle back into the deep comfort of your protected environment, where conflict is mediated by technology and not decided by the brutal clash of flesh and bronze, allowing the assurance of this physical and psychological security to become the final, grounding thought that pulls your entire body down into a heavy, continuous, and profoundly restful sleep. You would be forced to confront the harsh truth that the concept of a permanent, centralized university or structured, publicly funded school system as you know it does not exist, meaning that your education is entirely dependent on the personal whim, the physical availability,
and the transient reputation of individual, often peripatetic, philosophers and sophists who might only reside in your city for a brief, unpredictable period. Imagine the absolute weight of memory required of the student, for with scrolls being expensive and difficult to read, the primary method of instruction is the oral tradition, forcing you to listen intently and then rely entirely on your ability to memorize long, dense passages of poetry, philosophy,
and history verbatim, creating a constant, exhausting pressure on your recall capacity that would quickly overwhelm your modern, note-taking mind.
The intellectual treasures of the past, the epic poems of Homer, the histories of Herodotus, or the profound dialogues of Plato do not exist as cheap, interchangeable copies that you can highlight and annotate, but as rare, precious, and fragile artifacts that must be physically sought out, borrowed with great difficulty,
and painstakingly copied by scribes at immense personal cost, turning every act of scholarship into an arduous pilgrimage. This reliance on the physical scroll means that the entire body of knowledge is profoundly vulnerable to destruction, for a single fire in a private library or a shipwreck containing a rare shipment of papyrus could permanently erase centuries of irreplaceable human wisdom, leaving entire schools of thought vanished without a trace, creating a sense of terrifying intellectual precarity that has been eliminated by digital backups and global distribution. The act of becoming truly educated is a profoundly inefficient and disorganized process, demanding that you spend years of your life simply following various teachers from place to place, piecing together fragments of different disciplines without the guidance of a modern curriculum, academic prerequisites, or the guarantee that your teacher will even remain in the city long enough to complete a full course of instruction. Furthermore, the intellectual specialization that defines your modern career path is viewed with suspicion, for the truly respected scholar is expected to be a polymath fluent in rhetoric, poetry, mathematics, and military strategy, forcing you to master a terrifying breadth of subjects without the structured compartmentalization that allows your modern mind to focus its efforts and achieve specialized expertise.
The difficulty is compounded by the lack of standardized terminology and scientific methodology, meaning that the ancient thinkers you study often rely on complex, idiosyncratic language, lacking the clear, agreed-upon definitions and systematic frameworks that underpin modern academic disciplines, forcing you to spend exhausting hours simply attempting to decipher the foundational terms of debate.
The overall feeling would be one of intellectual fragility and profound isolation, realizing that your access to the wisdom of the past is conditional. Your learning is constantly at risk of being forgotten, and your ability to exchange complex ideas with contemporaries is hampered by the slow,
difficult process of writing, travel, and oral dissemination,
denying you the vibrant, instantaneous academic connectivity you depend upon.
Allow the heavy weight of required memorization and the anxiety over lost scrolls to completely dissipate now. Let the disorganized chaos of ancient instruction fade into the quiet, reassuring order, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of instantaneous knowledge access and organized education, acknowledging the profound blessing of university systems,
affordable books, and the ability to retrieve any piece of information within seconds.
Allow the intellectual pressure of memorization and the transience of ancient teaching to completely fade from your awareness, and bring your focus instead to the universal, inescapable, and utterly exhausting reality of ancient agriculture, a relentless physical struggle against unyielding soil, unpredictable weather,
and primitive technology that would condemn the vast majority of the population to a life of ceaseless, grinding labor for marginal, uncertain returns.
You would be forced to confront the harsh truth that the highly fertile, easily worked plains that support modern industrial farming are almost entirely absent in the mountainous, rocky landscape of Greece, meaning that every inch of cultivated land, or chora, must be fiercely contested with the wilderness,
often requiring you to spend weeks clearing fields of stone and scrub using only simple handheld tools.
Imagine the immense, continuous physical strain of using the ARD, or primitive plough, which is a heavy, wooden implement with a point of iron that merely scratches the surface of the soil rather than turning it over, forcing you to guide a team of slow,
stubborn oxen across the uneven ground while exerting constant, back-breaking force to keep the shallow forest straight, a process that must be repeated multiple times to even partially prepare the earth.
The entire process of planting is equally demanding and inefficient, as the lack of sophisticated seed drills means that you must manually broadcast the grain often barley or emmer wheat across the freshly scratched field, followed by another round of strenuous ploughing or harrowing to cover the seed.
A system that guarantees significant waste and leaves the crop highly vulnerable to birds, rodents, and variable weather.
Your entire year's survival is held hostage by the utterly unpredictable nature of the weather, for there are no advanced satellite forecasts, no modern irrigation systems to mitigate drought, and no flood control to manage heavy rains, meaning that a few weeks of unseasonable dryness or a single
violent storm could instantly wipe out your entire harvest, resulting in immediate, catastrophic famine for your family.
The constant depletion of the soil's nutrients is a relentless problem, for the lack of modern chemical fertilizers forces you to rely on crude, low-yield methods such as rotating your crops with fallow periods or using minimal amounts of animal manure, a necessity that ensures that the yield from your land is profoundly small compared to modern standards, guaranteeing that even in a good year, you are only slightly ahead of starvation. This low yield translates directly into a life of perpetual economic fragility, where you are never more than a single crop failure, or one sudden drought away from forced debt, starvation, or the terrifying necessity of selling your land and sinking into the poverty of the urban wage laborer, creating a level of continuous, low-grade financial anxiety that is unimaginable in your protected world. The farming calendar itself is a continuous cycle of exhaustive, repetitive labor plowing in the autumn, pruning olives and vines in the winter, constant weeding and tending in the spring, and the final, brutal exertion of the harvest in the summer, where you must manually reap the grain with a sickle under the scorching sun, followed by the exhausting process of threshing and winnowing the grain, ensuring that every season brings its own unique form of physical breakdown. You would realize that the ancient philosophical ideal of the citizen enjoying leisure time for politics is only possible because the majority of the population, including the small landholders, the slaves, and the women, are engaged in this unending, brutal agricultural toil, a silent, invisible sacrifice of the body that funds the democracy and the culture. Allow the heavy, straining pull of the oxen and the blinding dust of the dry field to completely fade from your awareness. Let the immense, chronic ache in your back and shoulders dissolve into the deep cushioning beneath you, and feel the tremendous, quiet relief of mechanized agriculture and predictable food supply, acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where one person's labor can feed thousands and where technology shields you from the tyranny of the weather. Allow the profound physical exhaustion of the primitive plow and the existential anxiety over crop failure to completely dissolve now,
and bring your focus instead to the universal, invisible threat posed by the catastrophic lack of modern public health infrastructure. A fundamental failure of ancient municipal engineering that ensured every city was a constant breeding ground for endemic disease and inescapable filth. You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that the impressive stone temples and the grand public buildings stand in stark, dangerous contrast to the utter primitiveness of the domestic sanitation system.
For the widespread network of underground sewers and pressurized clean water lines that define your modern city are almost entirely absent from the everyday residential quarters of the ancient world. Imagine the daily necessity of dealing with human waste through the use of a simple chamber pot, a ceramic vessel that must be manually emptied, a crude system that often results in the waste being casually tossed out of an upper-story window and onto the street below.
Ensuring that the unpaved alleys and roads are perpetually slick with a mixture of urine, sewage, and decomposing refuse. The essential scarcity of clean, running water in the private home would be a constant source of stress. For while major public fountains might be supplied by aqueducts or mountain springs, the majority of the population relies on communal wells or cisterns that are highly susceptible to contamination from surface runoff and the surrounding polluted ground, turning the very substance needed for life into a primary carrier of death. You would find yourself perpetually drinking and cooking with water of unknown quality, knowing that every glass carries the potential for deadly waterborne pathogens like cholera or typhoid, introducing a constant, low-level anxiety that dictates you must rely on the costly and flavor-altering process of boiling or diluting your water with wine to mitigate the invisible, continuous danger.
The lack of effective municipal garbage collection further compounds the problem, for waste is often simply dumped into open pits outside the city walls or allowed to accumulate in unused spaces and ravines, attracting FLIs, rodents, and scavenging animals, creating vast,
putrefying breeding grounds for disease that perpetually threaten the health of the entire urban population.
Even the occasional communal trip to the public bathhouse, while offering temporary physical relief, does not solve the underlying health crisis, for the stagnant, often reused water in the massive public pools, combined with the close, shared contact of hundreds of unwashed bodies, transforms the bathhouse itself into an efficient mechanism for the rapid transmission of skin diseases, parasites, and systemic infections.
This comprehensive failure of preventive public health means that sickness is not a rare, isolated event, but a constant, endemic feature of life, where the majority of the population suffers from persistent parasites, chronic digestive issues,
and frequent bouts of illness that are a direct consequence of the inescapable filth and the continuous consumption of contaminated resources.
The psychological result is a profound, unconscious acceptance of low-level illness as the baseline state of existence, a reality where you are rarely truly well. Your digestive tract is constantly disrupted, and your energy levels are perpetually lowered by the body's ceaseless struggle against chronic microbial and parasitic invaders,
preventing the robust health you associate with true well-being.
Allow the sickening stench of the unsewered streets and the constant anxiety over contaminated well water to completely dissipate now. Let the subtle, energy-sapping aches of endemic ancient illness vanish entirely from your body, and feel the immense, quiet relief of modern sanitation and clean water infrastructure,
acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where massive, invisible pipes ensure that clean water flows freely and sewage is swiftly and safely removed.
You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that the elegant, efficient system of Arabic numerals 1, 2, 3 that you use so effortlessly does not exist, and instead, you must rely on clumsy, additive notation systems like Greek or Roman numerals,
which possess no concept of place value and, most critically, no concept of zero, making the necessary operations of multiplication, division, and long-form arithmetic intensely complex and virtually impossible to perform on paper.
Imagine the immense, draining mental energy required to perform even a simple transaction involving multiple goods, having to manually tally and retally everything using a counting board or abacus calculi by physically moving small stones or tokens, an arduous process that demands intense,
singular concentration and offers endless opportunities for human error that cannot be easily verified or corrected.
The simplicity of modern bookkeeping, where every transaction is clearly recorded and balanced using standardized columns, and digital ease is replaced by the chaos of individualized, cumbersome methods, forcing merchants to rely on wax tablets and rough scrolls that are difficult to manage, prone to fading,
and completely lack the double entry checks that guarantee the security and integrity of modern financial records. This difficulty in performing swift, accurate calculation means that large-scale, complex economic planning and the rapid exchange of commodities are severely hampered, ensuring that the entire financial system operates at a painfully slow, laborious pace, preventing the exponential growth and efficient organization that define the modern market. Compounding this mathematical burden is the frustrating and economically stifling reality of the lack of standardized weights and measures across the various Greek city-states, meaning that every journey, every transaction, and every shipment is subject to chaotic, regional variations that invite fraud and demand constant, skeptical re-verification.
Imagine attempting to trade grain from Athens using the Athenian medimnos, a unit of volume, when you arrive in Corinth, where the local unit for grain is completely different, forcing you to manually calculate, measure, and verify the equivalents on the spot, creating a constant, frustrating source of friction, mistrust,
A negotiation that slows down commerce and raises the cost of every item.
There is no universal meter or kilogram defined by a central international body.
Instead, the length of a measure like the foot or the cubit often varies not only from polis to polis, but sometimes even within the same city depending on the context, ensuring that precise engineering, coordinated construction, and inter-regional trade are constantly complicated by the need to reconcile incompatible scales.
This profound inaccuracy and variability would instill a deep-seated suspicion in every ancient transaction, forcing you to perpetually doubt the honesty of the vendor, the accuracy of the scale, and the precise weight of the silver coin,
creating a psychological state of exhausting vigilance that makes the simple act of buying a loaf of bread or a length of cloth a complex negotiation fraught with potential error and deceit.
Allow the mental exhaustion of tallying numbers on the abacus and the frustration over the lack of a universal measure to completely dissipate now. Let the anxiety over fraudulent weights and measures vanish entirely from your mind, and feel the immense, quiet relief of standardized units and computational ease.
Acknowledging the profound blessing of Arabic numerals, the concept of zero and pocket-sized calculators that handle complex figures effortlessly.
Allow the frustrating chaos of manual calculation and the confusing variations in weights and measures to completely dissolve from your awareness, and bring your focus instead to the profound, continuous psychological toll imposed by the absence of reliable, personal communication technology.
A reality that would leave your modern social structure built on instant connectivity feeling isolated, fractured, and perpetually anxious about the well-being of distant loved ones.
You would be forced to confront the harsh reality that there is absolutely no standardized public postal service, no system of organized, routine letter delivery comparable to the vast, efficient networks that connect your modern world, meaning that the casual act of sending a thought or an update to a friend living even 100 miles away becomes a costly, complicated, and deeply uncertain undertaking.
Imagine the immense, draining effort required simply to dispatch a message, forcing you to rely on hiring an expensive, dedicated messenger Kerix who must be individually paid for his time and the risks of the journey.
Or perhaps waiting for days or weeks for a known traveler or merchant to pass through who is willing to carry your fragile papyrus scroll as a favor, creating an absolute reliance on chance and goodwill.
The very materials of written correspondence are a source of stress, for your message cannot be scribbled onto cheap, ubiquitous paper, but must be carefully written onto rare, costly, and perishable papyrus, or etched onto an even more fragile wax tablet,
adding both expense and a constant anxiety about the loss or destruction of the physical document during its long, perilous journey across bandit-ridden roads or stormy seas.
This difficulty ensures that communication is not conversational but declarative, for the expense and delay mean that a simple back-and-forth exchange takes weeks or even months to complete, forcing you to compose a single, dense letter that anticipates all possible questions, eliminating the possibility of the casual,
immediate emotional support and synchronous planning that defines modern friendship and business.
You would experience a constant, low-grade emotional anxiety regarding distant family members, a son serving in the army, a relative traveling on a trade mission, or a daughter married into a distant polis, for the silence is not a sign of contentment, but merely a lack of information. forcing you to endure long, agonizing periods where you have absolutely no reliable knowledge of their health, safety, or well-being.
The sheer speed of events would constantly outpace the speed of your communication, meaning that you often receive news of a family death, a major battle, or a catastrophic economic shift weeks after the event has already transpired, leaving you perpetually reacting to history after the fact and unable to offer timely advice, assistance, or even simple comfort.
Furthermore, the lack of modern telecommunications means that running a large, complex logistical operation like managing a distant farm, coordinating a naval fleet, or directing a trade network is a nightmare of guesswork and delay, forcing leaders to make high-stakes decisions based on information that is often weeks old and unreliable, adding an unbearable layer of risk to every major undertaking.
The psychological consequence is a profound, enforced reduction in your social sphere, limiting your capacity for true emotional investment to those individuals who live immediately within sight and earshot, as the effort required to maintain distant relationships becomes too costly, too slow, and too psychologically taxing to endure, leaving you isolated in a small, localized world. Allow the constant anxiety over the distant messenger and the fear of the unwritten word to completely dissolve now. Let the slow, agonizing silence of weeks without news vanish entirely from your mind, and feel the immense, quiet relief of instantaneous global connection.
Acknowledging the profound blessing of a world where text, image, and voice cross continents in a heartbeat, making distance meaningless.
Allow the psychological isolation caused by slow communication and the tyranny of silence to completely dissolve from your awareness, and bring your focus instead to the chaotic, often terrifying reality of legal and personal identity in a world utterly devoid of modern, state-issued documentation. A system that would leave your most basic rights and ownership entirely vulnerable to the whims of memory and the honesty of your neighbors. You would be forced to confront the harsh truth that the security and convenience provided by a birth certificate, a passport, or any state-issued identification number, that clear, indisputable proof of who you are and where you belong, simply does not exist, meaning that your legal status, citizenship, and identity are entirely dependent on the fallible, perishable memory of human witnesses. Imagine the immense difficulty of conducting any major legal transaction, such as buying or selling a piece of property, verifying an inheritance, or establishing the legitimacy of a marriage, knowing that the ultimate proof of ownership lies not in a centralized, secure land registry, but in a fragile, handwritten contract often stored on a temporary wax tablet or a perishable piece of papyrus.
The frailty of the ancient contract would be a constant source of anxiety, for without modern notarization, standardized formats, and ironclad government enforcement, any major agreement is highly susceptible to tampering, loss, or outright denial by the opposing party, forcing you to rely entirely on the presence and testimony of trusted witnesses to confirm the legitimacy of your claims in court.
This reliance on witnesses means that your legal security is fundamentally social, not systemic.
If your witnesses die, move away, or are bribed or intimidated into silence, your entire legal claim, whether to a debt owed, a piece of land, or the guardianship of your own children, can vanish overnight, forcing you to live in a perpetual state of vigilance over your relationships.
The most fundamental issue lies in the lack of any centralized, state-maintained record-keeping system for demographic data. There are no public archives meticulously tracking births, deaths, taxes, or land transfers with the detail and security you are accustomed to, ensuring that any historical fact about your family or your fortune must be laboriously reconstructed from scattered, incomplete private records. If you are traveling outside your home city, you are without any definitive, portable proof of citizenship or legal status, making you instantly vulnerable to suspicion, arbitrary arrest, and exploitation by local officials who can easily question your identity, leaving you dependent on the chance recognition of a former acquaintance or the mercy of the magistrate. The psychological consequence of this institutional chaos is a constant, low-grade fear of legal dissolution. The knowledge that a single, devastating event, a house fire that burns your family's private records, a dispute that turns your key witnesses against you, or a malicious legal challenge to your inheritance could instantly and irrevocably destroy your social standing and your economic existence. Even the process of taxation is made complex and often unfair by the absence of precise record keeping, relying on often inaccurate declarations of wealth or the subjective estimation of public officials, ensuring that tax disputes are frequent, contentious, and driven by personal influence rather than verifiable facts.
Adding another layer of frustrating financial instability to your life. Allow the terrifying frailty of the ancient contract and the fear of losing your legal witnesses to completely dissolve now. Let the anxiety over an unidentifiable self vanish entirely from your mind, and feel the immense, quiet relief of secure, documented identity and systematized record keeping. Acknowledging the profound blessing of centralized databases, birth certificates, and clear property deeds that protect your entire existence from arbitrary challenge. You would be forced to confront the harsh truth that your entire wardrobe is overwhelmingly dominated by two, often rough and heavy, natural fibers, wool and linen, meaning that the vast array of soft, light, durable, and chemically stable synthetic materials, nylon, polyester, silk blends, and fine, combed cotton that define your modern comfort simply do not exist in your world. Imagine the continuous, scratchy irritation of wearing coarse, unbleached wool next to your skin for the majority of the year, a necessity driven by its warmth and durability, but a persistent friction that causes your skin to feel rough, damp, and perpetually inflamed, leaving you with an almost ceaseless, low-level physical distraction that prevents deep, settled relaxation. The creation of these garments is a process of intense, continuous manual labor, for there are no factories, no automated spinning machines, and no complex weaving apparatuses. Instead, every thread must be laboriously spun by hand using a simple drop spindle, and every piece of fabric must be woven on an upright, hand-powered loom, ensuring that the finished product is both expensive and inherently coarse. The visual world of ancient dress would appear overwhelmingly monochromatic and monotonous to your modern eye, for the technology for creating stable, vibrant, and diverse chemical dyes is highly primitive and prohibitively expensive, meaning that the majority of clothing is the natural, uncolored shades of the sheep's wool of white, grey, or brown, or the pale, unbleached color of linen. If you desire true, vibrant color, the deep Tyrian purple, or a bright crimson, you must rely on organic, fragile dyes derived from crushed shellfish, rare insects, or specific plant roots, making colored cloth a symbol of incredible wealth and power, unattainable for the vast majority, reinforcing the visually dull and repetitive nature of everyday life. Furthermore, the lack of elastic fibers, zippers, or tailored construction means that the shapes of your clothes are simple, rectangular, and held onto your body by mere pins and carefully draped folds, resulting in constant, low-grade physical management adjusting your chiton or himation to ensure the garment remains properly draped and does not slip or fall off, eliminating the effortless, secure fit of modern attire. The process of repair and cleaning becomes another source of continuous, physical frustration, for the clothes are thick, heavy, and labor-intensive to wash and dry, and when they inevitably tear from wear, they must be painstakingly mended by hand using rough thread, a constant, necessary toil that denies you the modern luxury of simply replacing a damaged, inexpensive garment with a new one. This pervasive lack of soft, varied textiles and the constant, abrasive quality of the rough wool and linen ensures that your skin and your sensory system are always slightly overwhelmed and uncomfortable, creating a subtle barrier to the kind of deep, uninhibited rest and relaxation that your technologically spoiled body now takes for granted. Allow the relentless, scratching friction of the rough wool and the stiffness of the unbleached linen to completely dissipate now. Let the visual monotony of the beige and grey colors fade entirely, and feel the immense, quiet relief of soft, complex, and chemically engineered textiles. Acknowledging the profound blessing of soft cotton, smooth silk, and light, durable synthetic fibers that provide effortless, gentle comfort against your skin.